Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 311, Makhachev versus Tsarukyan 2. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing good, my man. I'm excited. We got a huge card. I know we got two dynamic wrestlers in the main event, so I pulled out. Look at this sweatshirt. This sweatshirt is over 25 years old. This is the old East Providence high school wrestling sweatshirt. Still fits me. So
that's the brag right there. He's just pulling it out to show that he still fits in it 20 years later.
Yeah, it still fits me because it was given to me like 4 sizes too big when I was wrestling, but it's all right. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. And obviously this is an ultra stacked card. I don't know whether this will end up being the best UFC pay-per-view card of the year on paper 11 months from now, but there's a good chance that it is. This thing is ridiculously loaded. I mean, when you've got Tagir Ulanbekov, a top 10 fighter, against Clayton Carpenter, an undefeated prospect, in the opening fight, you know that it's time to buckle up. You and I have both weighed in numerous times on how 14 fight cards are maybe a little too much, but I'd be hard pressed to say which fight I would take off this one. Like there's no garbage, which that's saying something, man.
I'd take off Dumas fight. Other than that,
we just take him out of the UFC entirely.
Yeah, that'd be entertaining. I mean, this card, I mean, you got to give it an A. It's absolutely loaded. I mean, the top 3 fights could all headline pay-per-views. I mean, obviously, Prohaska and Hill, it's not for a title or anything, but if something fell through and you got stuck with that, like that's happened before. You could probably go 7 or 8 fights deep. They could just headline any card, like a fight night and stuff.
Turcios versus Moicano. Jailton Almeida versus Serghei Spivac. I'm kind of surprised they didn't save that one as a fight night main event, because top 10 heavyweights is exactly the kind of thing they love to do that with. I mean, absolutely. I'm 100% in agreement. Obviously, we're recording this on Sunday night, 6 days out from fight night. The question on a lot of people's minds is it still going down at Intuit Arena in Los Angeles? And for those who can't keep up with the constant name changes of arenas because of naming sponsors, that's the one that the LA Clippers play in. And the Fires are currently 10 miles from the venue. A couple of concerts got canceled this past week, but according to the UFC and according to the venue, it is still happening in LA. Yeah. And if I'll say this, obviously the safety of the fighters, the safety of the fans should be the number one consideration. Coaches. But if they the coaches, but if they feel they can do it safely, then I'm glad they are, because the last thing a city needs when it's going through what LA is oh, and by the way, we're going to take a couple $1 million in revenue from you, because we're so because it's LA is a tourist town, a sports town, it's what their economy runs on. So
they just lost the Rams game too, NFL game.
Mm-hmm. So I hope the Fires are under control to the point that it's not even a question by the time, the end of fight week rolls around, that, this was the right decision.
Absolutely.
And because having said that, there are people from all over the world that have already bought tickets to this thing. And I'm just talking about the fighters. We got people from Brazil, Russia, every part of the US, getting ready for this thing. We've already mentioned, hold on. And obviously, we don't want to glaze over. Both me and Ben are, thoughts and prayers to everybody in that area. Absolutely. I know some people that have been displaced. They're safe. They've got a safe place to stay. But it's terrifying. Just the idea that I'm leaving my house and I have no idea whether any of my shit will still be here when I get back. Yeah, that is terrible.
Yeah, so everyone be safe.
And as you mentioned, on our recap last night, to all the firefighters in California and the ones that have been brought in from out of state to shore things up.
Some out of country. Some came from Canada, Mexico.
So, enormous appreciation to them. Any other general thoughts about this card before we dive in?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely loaded. It's an A. We'll get right into it. But I mean, even thing we glazed over, there's some big hot prospects too on this card. So I mean, this thing is top to bottom absolutely loaded.
Top to bottom, absolutely loaded. At a listener's request, I'm going to go extra heavy on quizzing you on the odds on this one. Just really to kind of see your reaction to some of them, because there are 2 pick'ems on this card. And then for the most part, the rest of this card, the lines are very wide. So
okay, that's surprising, but okay.
It was to me as well, but we'll kind of see how it goes.
Okay, right, you ready? I mean, yeah. You said only 2 pick'ems. That surprised me because the top 3 fights can be all pick'ems. So anyway, so we'll get into it. Maybe I'll do what I think the line should have been first.
We'll do it either way. First up at UFC 311 is a men's flyweight matchup between Tagir Ulanbekov and Clayton Carpenter. Ulanbekov, the 33-year-old Dagestani, is 15-2 overall. He's 4-1 since joining the UFC as the former Fight Night's global flyweight champ. He is on a 2-fight winning streak, those being submission wins over Nate Maness and Cody Durden. That's the good news. The bad news is that the most recent of those, the Durden fight, was a little over a year ago. Ulanbekov was out all of 2024 with injury. This is his first fight back. He's going to look to pick up the momentum right where he left off, which had him sort of cruising towards the title picture, which is desperately in need of some fresh faces in that division. In order to pick that momentum back up, he's going to have to get past Carpenter. Carpenter, 28-year-old American, training out of Arizona, perfect 8-0 as a professional. He's a perfect 2-0 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought most recently last October at UFC Fight Night Royval versus Taira, where he tapped out Lucas Hocha in the second round. So he is looking for his 3rd straight win in the UFC as well. Keith, I have the feeling you know who the favorite is here. What would you guess the line is?
Carpenter's good, so I'll say. So it's going to be pretty wide. So I'm assuming these lines are going to be much wider than you kind of already hinted to that. I don't think this is the pick'em fight, but I would put like Ulanbekov maybe -200.
Ulanbekov is -300. Carpenter plus 260.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because you know what? If they were fighting in January of 2024 and Ulanbekov was, fresh off of his last easy win, I could see this being -300. But just the fact that he's been out for over a year, and 33 isn't ancient for a flyweight, but it's definitely getting to kind of the top of the bell-shaped curve. I was a little surprised myself. Tell me how you see this one going and who you think wins.
Yeah, I mean, this is an absolute fantastic fight right out the gate. I mean, flyweight fights are always fun. Ulanbekov is a guy that he's been a little inconsistent. Like one fight, he looks incredible. The next fight, he looks like, I think he might be a little overrated. But he does a lot of good things, like on the feet. He's obviously this long and lengthy fighter. He's a really good athlete. He moves well. He likes to press the action. He's got a lot of volume. Pretty technically sound. He sets up his shots well with feints. He's accurate. Works behind a long jab, follows with straight shots, attacks with combinations. Does really well to cut angles when attacking, which kind of when you cover up, all of a sudden you're over here instead of directly in front of him. He has some power. I mean, he dropped Cody Durden in the last fight. The issue is defense, and this is going to be the issue a lot. Like I noticed, I was writing a lot of the same notes for this card. He stands really tall. His chin high in the air. He does throw hard calf kicks, though he doesn't check leg kicks himself, and he's got those big, long legs. Go back to the Bruno Silva fight. He had such great success. I mean, that was a long time ago, but Bruno Silva was really kicking up his legs. Though, to Ulanbekov's credit, he was super mentally tough, because I thought he was going to get stopped, and he dug deep and got a win, even with looked like he had a dead leg going on. He's a really good wrestler. I shouldn't say really good. He's a pretty good wrestler. I've said this in the past. I think his wrestling is a slightly overrated. He likes some inside trips from the body locks. He likes like the overhook, a step over leg dump, which I'm not too crazy about. He has some good entries. He's shown some great takedown defense in the past, but if he, you know what? I shouldn't say great because he has been taken down, but he's pretty good at getting back up, creating a scramble. He does need to improve his own top control. I keep going back to like the Tim Elliott fight where he kept taking Tim Elliott down only for, for Elliott to pop right back up because Ulanbekov was like off balanced. Again, that was a long time ago, but just, when you haven't fought a lot, we got to go back in the time machine. He's got pretty good back takes, good backpacking. He used like the body triangle with those long legs. He does have 6 career submissions. He hit Nate Manis with a really slick guillotine. He subbed Cody Durden in his last fight, which was such an impressive performance. If he's put on his back, he can hit a sweep. He showed he has good cardio. I mean, he pushed the action against Bruno Silva, against Alan Nascimento, and then against Tim Elliott, all 3 like big cardio guys. Carpenter, he's a tough task. Like I think the line should be much closer. He's a well-rounded fighter, guy that I've so far liked. High volume on the feet, tight, clean boxing, kind of like a slip and rip guy. Really springs into his shot. He has good power for a flyweight. He also cuts angles really well. He switches his stance in mid combination, which that's a big plus for me. He's got a big kicking game. He's got a quick high kick, hard calf kicks. Something that I think he should have success is throwing calf kicks against Ulanbekov. He has been rocked in the past, and that's concerning. But he's also a solid wrestler. Good entries, good top game. He works to get a better position on the ground. He is a submission artist. He has 4 subs on his record. He's got subs in back-to-back fights, and he has a super slick knee bar submission win on his record. I think it's an amazing matchup. I think it's a perfect way to start the night. You know how I feel about flyweights. I think flyweights should be higher up, but like in this card, I mean, man, we get out to a fantastic fight. Ulanbekov, I mean, he definitely has the higher upside due to his wrestling, and like I've said, in one fight he looks amazing. The next fight he looks a little overrated. I like Carpenter's game too. I'm going to say Carpenter weathers an early storm. And I'm going to say he takes over late. I'm feeling an upset right out the gate. I think he kicks up Ulanbekov's legs. I think he lands a few takedowns himself. Like I said, I think the lines should be much closer. I'm going to go with a pretty big upset pick right away. I'm going to give me Carpenter by split decision.
All right. Upset pick right off the bat for Keith. And I can totally feel that. I mean, again, it's concerning that Ulanbekov has been out as long as he has. He was a little inconsistent, even, when he was around, as you pointed out. Obviously on skills, kind of physicality for the division, athleticism, he's outstanding. He's a top 10 talent. Even if he hasn't been there in over a year, he hasn't shown it as consistently as he might have. And honestly, he's been inconsistent from fight to fight. Like he's had tougher time beating some of his foes than you might have liked. You mentioned that in his UFC debut, Bruno Silva almost pulled off what would have been a massive upset at the time because Ulanbekov was very highly touted. But then at the same time, his only loss in the UFC was to Tim Elliott, and Tim Elliott is a super, super trap fight. I mean, you mentioned, Ulanbekov was able to take Elliott down, but had trouble maintaining top control. Part of the reason for that is that Tim Elliott's hard to hold down. He loves to scramble. He's a good wrestler and grappler himself. He will cheerfully tell you that he'll cheat as much as he can get away with it.
Pull the cage.
And I would not be shocked at all if Carpenter pulled off the upset here. And if that happens, kudos to you for picking it. I'm going to go on the assumption that Ulanbekov is more or less the guy that we saw when, he last fought, when he got maybe his most impressive performance in the UFC yet, taking out Cody Durden. I'm going to say Ulanbekov looks fine. Carpenter does make things interesting. Certainly the leg kicks are something to look out for, like you mentioned. But give me Ulanbekov to win 2 rounds out of 3 here. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's the second and third, because in the first round, he's shaken off the rust, dealing with Carpenter's leg kicks, maybe has trouble getting Carpenter down, or but yeah, give me Ulanbekov to show out by the end of this fight and pick up a decision. Next up at UFC 311 is a men's bantamweight matchup between Ricky Turcios and Bernardo Sopai. We actually previewed this one back in November when they were scheduled to fight. That fight made it all the way to after weigh-ins, and then Turcios fell ill some sort of stomach ailment, which, it happens a couple times a year when fighters are rehydrating and eating after the big weight cut. The fight was canceled. They did not get a replacement opponent for Sopai. So this is the first time either of those guys have fought since then. I'm going to plug in that preview here. Do you have any different thoughts than you did 2 months ago, Keith?
Nope.
Me either. So enjoy this ancient footage, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Turcios, the 31-year-old Houstonian, is 12-4 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC as the bantamweight winner of season 29 of The Ultimate Fighter. He has alternated wins and losses, starting with his debut. He is coming in off a loss. He fought back in June at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Imavov, getting tapped out in the second round by Raul Rosas Jr. He will look to get back in the win column here against Sopai, who needs to do the same thing. Sopai, 24-year-old Albanian by way of Sweden, is 11-3 overall. He's 0-1 in the UFC. He made his debut back in March and was making a pretty good showing against a promising prospect in Vinicius Oliveira when he ran right into a flying knee that is still one of the most brutal knockouts of 2024. I mean, it's more for the snuff reel than the highlight reel, but it was one hell of a knockout. He's going to look to bounce back from that here, and he is comfortably favored to do so, as Sopai is around minus 275, Turcios plus 225. I mentioned earlier the column I wrote, stand and deliver. Ricky Turcios was another of the fighters that I said is under a little extra pressure here. And here's the reason. Adam Duffy, my kid, who, if you're familiar with our show, he's filled in on recaps a few times. We'll get him on a preview one of these days. He said to me once that Ricky Turcios fights like a stuntman. And that has stuck with me ever since, because he really does. And keep in mind that Turcios being a Houstonian, and not just Houstonian, but on my side of town, I've seen almost all of his regional fights, and I literally trained at the same gym he does. I'm intimately familiar with the guy's game. He is an absolute joy to talk to, and he is a blast to watch, but he's a wild man. He does fight like a stunt man, and I think he's kind of come up against the ceiling of how far he can go with that approach, because at this point, he has 2 wins and 2 losses in the UFC. He has a win over Brady Heastand in a fun, wild fight that, I'm sorry, Ricky, but if they ran that fight back now, I think Heastand probably wins the decision. His losses, it'd still be a fun fight, but Heastand would find a way to win 2 rounds. Then in his losses, I mean, he's been competitive in both of them. Neither Rosas nor Zahabi blew him out of the water, but Zahabi was more disciplined and won a striking battle against him. Rosas Jr. was more disciplined and won a ground battle against him. Turcios at his best is a good-sized bantamweight who's athletic, well-rounded, does everything at least decently. And I mean, he does well in wild fights because he does well as a high-volume, low-power striker, and he does well in scramble heavy grappling. Just he's not. He doesn't control the fights like maybe he should. Like getting into a scramble heavy grapple fest against Raul Rosas Jr. was probably not the way to go about things. And against Zahabi, it turned into an Amin Zahabi fight. It was a lousy fight. I mean, it may be the only boring fight I've ever seen Ricky Turcios in, but it's because Zahabi turned it into an Amin Zahabi fight. He turned it into a low output outside kickboxing battle and just kind of ignored all the flash and smoke from Turcios and won a straightforward decision. Turcios probably needs to tone it down a little bit if he wants his UFC run to be more than the occasional bonus check. And it's possible to do that and stay entertaining. Look at Michel Pereira. He went from a hilarious mix of top shelf skills and bottom shelf fight IQ into a guy that's actually turning into a middleweight contender and is still pretty damn entertaining to watch. I hope Turcios turns that corner. He has time to. He's still just 31. But if he hasn't, I think Sopai is going to be a rough matchup because Sopai is probably a little bit of a better athlete. He's younger. He is a physically strong guy. And until he ran into that flying knee from Vinicius Oliveira, he was doing a great job at pursuing a disciplined game plan and winning a straightforward fight against a fighter who's more established and probably more athletic than him. Just he was having good success wrestling him. Sopai is already at age 24 the kind of guy that, yeah, he made a terrible mistake against Oliveira or just got caught by a really opportunistic, hard-hitting striker, but you can already see him turning into the kind of guy that doesn't lose fights he should win. And Turcios hasn't done that yet. Until I see otherwise, I understand why the line is what it is, and give me Sopai to win a decision here. I would expect that it's pretty much a push on the feet, but Sopai will be able to take Turcios down. Like, Turcios, his defensive wrestling is not great, and it's made worse by the fact that he's happy to go to the ground and just get into like a Looney Tunes scramble. But Sopai being a pretty good offensive wrestler and positionally sound, I could see him just kind of snuffing that out, staying in top position, and punishing Turcios for doing risky things. So give me Sopai by decision here.
Dude, I give you a lot of credit, like, to pick against your own boy, your own teammate. Like, that's pretty ballsy.
And it's not just I see him at the gym. I like the guy. He is a super, super good dude. Yeah,
that's not Iron here. Yeah, listen, I know your public persona is a little different. I know you guys got some serious beef.
Oh, dude, if we had beef, he would kill me. He would kill me so hard. all bantamweight of him would kill me.
It's funny that you say things so differently on air, because you were just saying how much like he sucks and you beat his ass in practice all the time. Yeah, I mean, I mean, Turcios, he's so unorthodox. How do you really freaking talk about this guy? I mean, he's this pressure striker that, you know, he wins mostly on volume. He's very like unorthodox, kirky jerky. You know, I've said before, he's a hold your guy and kind of pressure striker. Opponents kind of have a hard time picking up his time and doing all the crazy things he does. A lot of feints. He's fairly athletic. He's pretty fast hands. He attacks with combinations. I like his check right hook from the southpaw stance. He blends punches and kicks together well. He loves to throw it out of the pocket and brawl. He's got a good chin. He can take a beating. I mean, go back to like the Dan Argueta fight where he's eating shots. When rocked, he reacts by moving forward and kind of pressing the action, never stopping. He will wrestle, blast through the hips kind of guy. Chains attempts together well. Good at winning scrambles. Good at kind of keeping his hips moving. Very funk style wrestling game. He's a weak defensive wrestler though. I mean, he's been taken down. Even like his best moment of his career was his run on Tough. Like, he was taken down in those fights. I mean, Brady Heaston took him down 6 times. Kevin Natividad took him down 7 times. Raul Rojas dominated him really everywhere. Yeah, he has a submission threat though. Like, he's very active tossing up submission attacks. He also uses subs to kind of give himself space to get back to his feet, and cardio is his best strength. It's a tool for him. What I love about Sopai is he's only 24. I mean, like, I love that. He was looking good in his UFC debut until he got hurt. He got hurt. He can fight out of both stances, quick hands, sets up his shots well with a lot of feints. Got a nice stiff jab, attacks with combinations. He's got good power. He's got 7 TKOs, good kicking game, good high kick, hard body kicks, hard calf kicks. Though he is open to calf kicks himself based on his like heavy boxing style. He will wrestle. He's got some fast entries too. Passes to better position on the ground. Good back takes. Good ground and pound. He has 3 subs on his record. Turcios is really fun, but I like Sopai. I liked him when I saw his film head into the UFC. Then added the fact, in what he even did in his UFC debut. Like, I'm a little worried about his chin based on the last fight, but he had moments in that. Add in his age where he can continue to improve at big bounds. Turcios is too hittable. Sopai didn't show. He's got. I mean, you go back to his original scene. He can crack. He's got some power. I say he catches Turcios' chin. I don't think he like knocks him out cold, but I think he hurts him enough, rocks him, maybe gets on top of him, hits him with some big shots. Give me Sopai by, I'll say second round to here.
Men's bantamweights take the cage next at UFC 3 11 as Rinya Nakamura looks to stay perfect against Muin Gafurov. Nakamura, the 29-year-old from Japan, is a perfect 9-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He's a perfect 2-0 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Road to UFC. He fought most recently almost a year ago at UFC 298, taking a unanimous decision over Carlos Vera. He's back now looking to go 3-0 in the big octagon, announce himself even more so a rising contender in this division. In order to do so, he will have to get past Gafurov. 28-year-old Tagir is 19-6 overall. He's 1-2 since joining the UFC as a veteran of Dana White's Contender Series Season 5. He appeared on that season and lost, went back to the regionals, won the LFA Bantamweight Championship, and was signed, where he dropped his first two UFC bouts, but bounced back with his first win last June at UFC on ABC, Whitaker versus Alaskarov, taking a unanimous decision over Kyung Ho Kong. So he'll look to keep the good vibes going here. Not favored to do so. I'm sure you're not surprised that Nakamura is the favorite. What would you guess the line is, Keith?
He's probably pretty hefty. I'd say like negative 220.
Heftier even than that. We got Rinya Nakamura at minus 450, Muin Gafurov plus 350. And I kind of get it, because here's the thing. I don't know if Nakamura is better than Gafurov everywhere, but he's enough better at one thing that it might not matter. Like Gafurov is a reasonably, like skill-wise, reasonably well-rounded, kind of a hard-hitting brawler on the feet who's proven that he can wrestle, whereas Nakamura is a great wrestler. Obviously, the guy's a former U23 world champ. He's a guy that, if timing had been different, if he'd had different plans, almost certainly would at least have been in the Olympics, if not medaled. He certainly would have been there. And thus far, it's transferred pretty cleanly to mixed martial arts. I've liked what I've seen out of him on, well, I mean, we didn't see much of him on Road to UFC because he knocked two dudes out in like 2 minutes. It's almost a 20-year throwback to that first wave of wrestle boxers that realized, hey, my core strength that I have from being a wrestler since I was 5 years old means I throw a really mean overhand right. Oh, and by the way, anytime I feint a level change, guys' hands go to their waist. So I'm just going to come out and clock people. That's been Nakamura. Like, obviously, he's not a one-weapon guy. He has a modern striking skill set, but it's that sort of revelation. Here, I've said this on our previews before. Anytime one fighter is, about a minus 400 or greater favorite, I will start from the opposite proposition and sort of ask myself, okay, if the underdog pulls off the upset, what does it look like? And sometimes, even with a big underdog, there's an obvious and plausible route to victory. It's just difficult. With Gafurov, I'm not sure there's even that. He would have to catch Nakamura with the punch of his life, because otherwise, Nakamura is faster, hits harder, and obviously a much, much better wrestler. I think he can take Gafurov down pretty much anytime he wants, either with an outside shot or getting inside, clinching, and just tossing him. And on top of everything else, Gafurov has not shown himself to be super, super durable. So I can't even see one of those fights where he gets washed for a round and then Nakamura starts to get tired and Gafurov hulks out. And I don't see that either. Like, this is a bad matchup for Muin Gafurov. I could see him hanging around for the 15 minutes, but I'm not picking it. Give me Nakamura by first round TKO. And he could easily just one-shot him on the feet. But I'm guessing what's more likely is he hurts him on the feet, pounds him out. This thing's over in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this matchup. I think I'm much higher in Gafurov than you are, but I mean Nakamura. This guy's a really good prospect. He's a really great athlete. Not the most technically sound. He kind of keeps his hands low, but he's a southpaw, and his hands are quick. He's got big power. I mean, he really steps into every shot trying to get a knockout, and a lot of times he has. He is very reckless, though. I mean, you see that the way the way he swings for the fences. He does all these crazy flying knees and stuff. He don't care. He's also one of these guys. I'm worried that he could fall in love with his hands despite having this huge wrestling background. He reminds me a lot of Aaron Pico, in the sense where Aaron Pico had this great, I mean, still does, but has this great wrestling pedigree, and into that level that Nakamura's on, but would stand in the pocket and throw down and against better judgment because he does have that big power. Nakamura is open to leg kicks. I don't like how he reacts to getting hit. He can overreact, and then that's when he starts getting really wild. He can close the distance and do really good work inside the clinch. He's extremely strong. I mean, his wrestling's off the charts. You mentioned it. He's a U23 world champion. I mean, that's it as a lead of the league. I mean, that's the tournament that Bo Nickel won. I mean, this is as high as it goes. You talk about wrong timing, and it might have been the wrong country too, being that Japan, because Japan is this powerhouse in the wrestling scene. They did incredible in the last Olympics. So I'm not going to pretend like I really know Japanese wrestling that well, but if he went to the Olympics, he might have won it based on what I saw Japan do in this past Olympics. He's got great entries, great hip control, great top game. He controls a little too much. I would like to, when he gets takedowns, to do some more damage from the top, which is funny because when he wrestles so he fights so different than he does on the feet. On the feet, he's swinging the fences. When he wrestles, he just kind of holds on, and he's not a submission threat. Gafurov. The first thing about Gafurov that stands out to me is he has this big, large, hairy patch on his back, and it's so freaking distracting. So luckily, if it's a wrestling match, we won't see it. On the feet, he's a pressure striker. He fights at a nonstop pace, throws nonstop punches. He has good power. He really sits on his punches. He can get wild with a strike, which we could really set up a really fun exchange between these two. But he throws a winging overhand right, a winging left hook. He's got a pretty big kicking game, though he'll often not set him up. He throws some naked leg kicks, throw some spinning back kicks. I think he's a solid wrestler. He's good at kind of following his strikes into his entries. He's a two-time world champion in combat sambo, which is always translated really well to MMA. He had 7 submission wins, though he was quickly subbed by guillotined by Sedriques Magomedov. He gets on top. I've said this before about him, and he whips his ground and pound very old school Fedor style, where he'll punch through your guard. If he's put on his back, though, he really struggles to get up. But I like his cardio. I've seen him fight hard 15 minutes. I think the line is way. I mean, you sounded like you think the line should be even bigger. I think the line is way off. I think the line should be much closer. I think this is an incredible fight. I almost wanted to take Gafurov due to his output. The thing is, Nakamura, I mean, he's the guy that's more likely to end the fight with one single strike. Gafurov is a solid wrestler, but he shouldn't be on Nakamura's level. He's world-class. He has a big pedigree. Now, I want to say this. Just because a guy has a bigger pedigree, sometimes MMA wrestling is so different. I mean, just the stance and everything. If there's a straight wrestling match, then Nakamura would be a negative 5,000 favorite. But he still has the more avenues of victory, so I'll go with the prospect. I've been thinking about that big punch, and I hope that's how it ends. Nothing against Gafurov, but I want the big, exciting finish. But I go the opposite. I'll say Nakamura wins by decision.
Women's bantamweights are up next at UFC 311 as Carol Rosa and Ailin Perez square off. Rosa, the 30-year-old Brazilian, is 18-6 overall. She's 7-3 in the UFC. She has alternated wins and losses for going on 4 years now, but she is coming in off a win. She fought most recently back in August of last year at UFC on ESPN, Tagir versus Spivac 2, where she took a unanimous decision over Pani Kianzad. She would like to break the streak of alternating wins and losses, obviously, and get her second straight win. She will need to get past Perez to do so. Perez, also 30 years old, Argentinian, training out of Florida now, though. 11-2 overall, 4-1 in the UFC, and after losing her first fight in the octagon, she's actually rattled off 4 straight wins over the last 2 years. The most recent one last September was a first-round submission of Daria Zheleznyakova. That was at UFC Fight Night, Moicano versus Santini. So Perez looking for her 5th straight win in the UFC women's bantamweight division, and against the predictions of at least some pundits, making herself an unlikely contender. This one is one of the few fights at UFC 311 that's actually pretty close on the lines. It's not one of the 2 pick'ems, but it's the only other one that's less than a 2-1 favorite. Your favorite is -190. Your underdog is +160. Who are they, Keith?
Host is the favorite.
You are correct. Carol Rosa -190. Ailin Perez +160. My oblique reference to certain pundits would, of course, be myself, because I had plenty of laughs at Ailin Perez's expense when she came to the UFC. If you've been watching our show long enough, that was back in 2022, and I laughed because I had to do tape study of a woman fighting on like preschool gym mats, like those interlocking crepe foam mats in some gym in like southern Brazil or northern Argentina. And I had my laughs, and she got tapped out easily by Stephanie Egger in her UFC debut. And then darned if she didn't just sort of start to turn a corner. And
yeah, she's not bad.
Well, she's won 4 straight fights, and none of them are against very good fighters, but women's bantamweight right now is not a very good division. So
it's like Kayla Harrison and everybody else.
It really is. But having said that, there's another fighter on this card that I had very much the same take on and have had to eat some crow. And that, of course, is Serghei Spivac, where I'm like, this dude beat like Tony Lopez and Travis Fulton in his last 2 fights. He is not ready for the UFC. And when Walt Harris cold cocked him, I was like, see what I mean? And now all of a sudden he's a top 10 fighter and a fringe contender. And in both cases,
headlined UFC cards.
Headline UFC and won. And in both cases, I think it's a little of the same thing, where once they were able to train full time, just get in better shape and become better fighters, they kind of turned a corner. And it helps that, you know, they're in 2 of the shallowest divisions in the UFC. But this fight for me is battle of the bullies. And I don't mean that about their personalities. I'm sure they're both lovely women. Actually, I'm not sure if that. Perez seems kind of annoying, but it's not about their personalities. I'm just saying that both of these women tend to do best. Like, they're both big, strong bantamweights. I mean, they've both fought at featherweight within the last 3 or 4 years. They're both big, strong bantamweights, and they're both at their best when they can get their hands on the other woman. They're the stronger one. I mean, neither of them is a great wrestler, but they're both good at finding ways to muscle the other woman to the ground. And when they're able to do that, they thrive. When they can't, they don't. I think it's as basic as that for both of them. So for me, the question on this one is, yeah, they're going to come out and Perez is going to be in her karate stance and Host is going to bounce around like she wants to kickbox. And within 45 seconds, they're going to be clinched against the cage. And they're going to be that way for the rest of the fight or until someone gets finished. So the question for me is, who's going to thrive in that situation? And I'm kind of feeling Perez on this one.
Nice.
Hosa, like I mentioned, she's alternated wins and losses for the last several years, but the women who've beaten her, Norma Dumont, Sarah McMahon, Irene Aldana, they have different fight styles from each other, but all 3 of them are big and strong. And McMahon and Dumont were just able to out-grapple her, and Aldana was able to kind of stay upright enough to, well, that was also a super, super wild fight, but, you know, where they're like leg kicking each other to death and stuff. But I can see Perez getting a very Norma Dumont type win over Hosa, where it's competitive from round to round. It's not a blowout, but when they collide, it's either Perez getting top position and doing some work from there, or denying the takedown because she thinks she's getting the better of it in the clinch and just kind of mashing her with knees, short punches like she likes to do. I don't have a ton of confidence in this one, but I do like Perez in the moderate upset here. Give me Perez in just a grimy, grindy 3-round fight. I would be surprised if this one ended in a finish.
It's funny you mentioned Sarah McMahon, and I was just thinking about how she's actually going back to the wrestling, and she's a wrestling coach, and she's a Mitt Allure, who people who don't know who that is. She's a 20-year-old Olympic gold medalist in wrestling. She's absolutely sensational. I think she's the best pound-for-pound female wrestler. She's won like everything, and she's only 20 years old. Sitting there, I'm like, she wrestles at 150. I'm like, she could cut down to 135. And I'm like, I would pick her to beat probably 90% of the roster right now with zero MMA experience. So I'd do anything for her to come over to MMA.
Well, and it's part of it is because of the division. It's the same thing. Like, if Gable Stevenson decided to train MMA for 6 months, I think he beats all but 5 or 6 UFC heavyweights right now.
Totally.
It's just because he's that good a wrestler and that good an athlete. And I think it's probably a similar thing. That's
if Gable Stevenson came over to MMA, I would bet my life savings that he wins the UFC title.
Right. But you wouldn't say that about a great wrestler at like who'd be fighting at 155 or 170. The division's just too good.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. I love that your analysis. This is so great. This is what makes our show so good. Ailin Perez, like, she got better shape and she just became a better fighter. Like, I like that. It reminds me of I was at a wrestling tournament today. My son's main like training partner, a really good kid. He was going for first place today, and the kid he was going against right before my wife asked, like, how's, we're going over my son's finals match, then going over his teammate's finals match, and he's like, how's he gonna do? Like, my son had a really good opponent, and then the other kid had and I'm like, how's Alden gonna do? Did you see his opponent? I'm like, he's a short pudge ball who's cross-eyed and his nose is running. and my wife's like, that has nothing to do with wrestling. I'm like, you think Alden's going to lose to a kid who can't wipe his own nose? I don't think Alden's going to kill him, and he did. So, congratulations, my boy. But I was calling around. It was great. Anyways, he did beat. I shouldn't call some poor 9-year-old kid a punch ball, but he was a little cross-eyed. Let's get to this matchup. I think it's a really fun matchup. I'm glad that the line is close. It's. Karol Rosa, I mean, she isn't a great athlete. I mean, that's why she struggled with the speed of like Norma Dumont. But she makes it up for just being a big brute herself. And you talked about, big, strong women beat her, because that's kind of her game too. Like, she's a brute. She's not the most technically sound. She stands up tall. She keeps her chin high in the air, but she just makes up with it by being just like a gritty type person. She has good output. She's got a nice, crisp jab, follows with combinations, kind of your basic 1-2 combinations. She can get a little wild and wing her overhand right. But she won't move back. She's a hold your ground type striker. She does telegraph her shots because she kind of winds up. She does have good power though. I like that she'll end combinations with kick. And she's got really good kicks. That's the best part of the game. She beat up Vanessa Mello with it. She beat up Jocelyn Edwards with it. She beat up Beshko Hare with calf kicks. I mean, she lost to Irene Aldana, but she kind of won the war. She kicked Irene Aldana's legs like 1,000 times. She can close the distance and use her strength and size well in the clinch. Beshko Hare is kind of a brute herself, and that's where Karol Rosa beat her up. She's a good wrestler. I shouldn't say good wrestler, but she's a sneaky wrestler. She can get some takedowns. Not the best defensive wrestler if she's taken down. If she gets the takedown, she's got a pretty good top game. If she gets taken down, she struggles to get back up, and we saw that against Sarah McMahon. But you're also talking about, Olympic silver medalist Sarah McMahon. If she gets on top, she's got pretty good ground and pound. Ailin Perez, better athlete than we first thought. She's a pressure fighter, constantly taking the ground, good volume, fast hands, attacks with combinations. She loves forcing her opponents back by doing like some spinning attack or something. You mentioned she can wrestle. She's got some good entries, though she really won't set up her entries with her strikes. She also get inside and look for some judo throws. She's very physically strong. She gets a limb. You can go for a ride. I mean, she got subbed by Egger, but she also tossed Egger on her head. She turned Ashley Evans Smith into a takedown dummy, someone who has a wrestling background herself. She's got a strong top game. She advances position on the ground. She's got some pretty good hard ground and pound. If she's put on her back, she struggles to get backed up. And cardio has been an issue. Like go back to the Lucy Pudilova fight. Not the best fighter, but she kind of gassed down in that fight. I like this matchup. This is actually one that I'm looking forward to. I think this is a big step up in competition for Perez. But I'm kind of with you a little bit. I think she's an underrated fighter. I'm glad that the lines are following that because I thought when you said, oh, there'll be this handful of close lines and then some big ones, I was wondering if like Rosa was going to be a pretty big favorite because she has beaten fighters on a higher level than Perez has been so far. If Perez can land some takedowns, she can win. However, she's usually the physically stronger fighter. And I don't think that's going to be the case against Rosa. I mean, Rosa's a brute herself. I think Perez usually outmuscles her opponents in the clinch, and I don't think she'll have that advantage against Rosa. I think from distance, I think Rosa's going to kick her legs off, and that's what I expect. I pick Rosa to, use the clinch to her advantage. When they're breaking away, she's on those calf kicks, and I think that's going to lead her to a decision win. Give me Rosa by decision.
All right. So we have a little bit of disagreement here, but what we agree on is that we think this fight will go to decision. If it goes to decision, win or lose, that will be 11 straight decisions to open up Karol Rosa's UFC run. I believe that will tie the record. I'll have to get with Jay Petrie on that, but it's either the record or one shy of it. Yeah.
All right, now I'm rooting for a decision now.
Please. Lightweights take the cage next as Grant Dawson looks to keep building on his momentum against Diego Ferreira. Dawson, the 30-year-old Nebraska native fighting out of Florida, is 22-2-1 overall. He's 10-1-1 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. Worth noting that he is 7-1-1 above featherweight. He spent some of his early run in the UFC trying to make featherweight for no good damn reason. See also Renato Moicano that we'll be talking about in a little while. But since moving up from 145, he's 7-1-1, and he is on a 2-fight win streak. He had that disastrous headliner against Bobby Green in October of 2023, where he got knocked out in 30 seconds in his first UFC main event. Since then, he has back-to-back wins over Joe Solecki and Rafa Garcia. The most recent of those, the Garcia fight, was last October at UFC Fight Night Royval versus Tyra. So he'll look to make it 3 in a row here, kind of sneak his way up the lightweight rankings at the expense of Ferreira. Diego Ferreira, Brazilian by way of Texas's Rio Grande Valley, turns 40 on the day of the event. Would love nothing better than to celebrate with a win, I'm sure. But he is 19-5 overall. He's 10-5 since joining the UFC as the former LFC. I mean, it's been a while because it's not even LFA. It is the LFC lightweight champ. He was on a 3-fight losing streak in 2021. Took a full year off. Since coming back, he has back-to-back wins over Michael Johnson and Mateusz Rebecki. The most recent of those, the Rebecki fight, was last May at UFC on ESPN, Lewis versus Nascimento. So improbably, the man they call CDF is looking for his 3rd straight win on his 40th birthday. He is not favored to do so. Dawson is your favorite. Keith, what do you think the line is?
I like Dawson negative 170.
So if you're watching at home, you now know that when Keith guesses a line, the real line, just double it and then take back a Dawson is minus 290, Ferreira plus 240 coming back. So obviously Dawson is a favorite. It's understandable why he's the favorite. He is a full decade younger than his opponents, and the UFC will certainly put the stat on screen what the winning percentage is of fighters that are, at least 7 years older than their opponent. It's not a good winning percentage, and if you exclude heavyweight and light heavyweight, the winning percentage gets even worse. 155 is not normally a division that is kind to the elderly. Having said that, there are some positives to take away on Ferreira here. One, yeah, he was on a 3-fight losing streak in 2021, but Mateusz Gamrot is a top 10 fighter. Beneil Dariush may still be, and at the time was absolutely a top 10 fighter. In fact, he was moving into like top 5 territory. And the Gregor Gillespie loss doesn't look great, but that's mostly because like Gillespie went fishing and doing wrestling clinics and never fought again. So, you know, Ferreira, he lost 3 fights to very good opponents. The problem was that he seemed to be fading fast. Like the things that had made his game run in his prime, because he was a top 10 talent himself a couple years before, were surprising power for a guy that looks kind of compact, very good wrestling for a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy. He's one of those types that had the athleticism, had the drive, and like learned to wrestle pretty well, and shocking power for a little guy. And also he had this incredible motor. I mean, when he beat I think it was Mairbek Taisimov in like Abu Dhabi, when it was like 100 degrees in the arena, and just outlasted him because he's this dude from the jungle of Brazil and from the Rio Grande Valley. All that seemed to be abandoning him.
He looked like 38.
Here's the thing, and I'm going to put this as delicately as possible, but there are 2 fighters on this card that really looked different after the UFC dropped USADA. One is Diego Ferreira. The other is Raoni Barcelos that we'll be talking about in a bit. But last year, 2024, was already kind of a historically good year for fighters over 35, over 36 in the UFC. Some people that we had thought were shot all of a sudden kind of came to new life. That was Ferreira against Rebeski, because he pulled a Diego Ferreira special where it was a bit of a war early on, and all of a sudden he was the fresher guy in the 3rd round, started rolling downhill, and again pulled off a CDF special.
Yeah, he looked great.
We're not a betting show, but given that as talented and athletic as he is, Grant Dawson is still a little bit of a front runner. Like, it is definitely not out of the realm of possibility that we get that. Because on paper, this should be a good matchup for Dawson. He's bigger than Ferreira, he's much younger, and he's good at a lot of the same things. Like, Dawson is a very, very good wrestler, very good grappler. He's especially a good grappler when it's being driven by his wrestling. Like, he's a very good top position grappler. When he gets taken down, it's not always as pretty. Like, Dawson should be able to come out, and if he's smart, or he's at least PTSD'd by getting clocked by Bobby Green, he's not going to want any of Ferreira's power. And he'll probably try to bring this thing to the ground quickly. And if it turns into a thing where Dawson's working from top position and Ferreira is stuck on bottom, throwing up submissions, trying to get scrambles started, trying to sweep, Dawson probably wins rounds that way and wins the fight. And unless he gets caught with something on the feet, or he really gets tired and Ferreira, again, kind of rips the Hulkamania shirt off and takes over in the 3rd round, Dawson should win a pretty straightforward 29-28 victory. It kills me to pick that because I like Ferreira a lot. You know, my professor, Alex Morono, will probably be cornering him on Saturday. I've loved all my interactions with the guy. I think he's a super good dude. And long before I knew him, he was a guy I really enjoyed watching fight. I'd love to be wrong here. I'd love to see him actually pull out the upset, but brain over heart, I think Dawson's size, youth, wrestling are going to be a little too much. Give me Dawson to win the first 2 rounds pretty uncontroversially, and then maybe have to kind of hold on late against another Ferreira comeback, but I'll take Dawson by decision here.
I love Carlos Diego Ferreira becomes the immortal Hulk Hogan. It's funny because the stare down is going to look like WrestleMania 3, you know, Andre the Giant at this Pontiac Silverdome. Let's make it. I want to see Carlos Ferreira pick up Grant Dawson and slam him right in the middle of the cage. If Carlos Diego Ferreira did that, dude.
If he does that, I will rip off my shirt on the recap and like run around.
There you go.
And I'll just have to put a thing like he's being Hulk Hogan, not Alex Jones. Like
there you go. Nice. Grant Dawson, he's excuse me, he's huge for the weight class. I mean, and he's going against a guy who's small for the weight class, so he's going to look even bigger. I've never really got a read on his striking. One fight, he looks like he's improved his striking. Other days, he looks like a one-dimensional fighter. I'm still not really sure what we have. When it's the good striking days, his hands are fairly quick. He has some decent pop in his hands. The thing is, his defense is an issue. He keeps his chin high in the air. I've said this before. He overreacts when getting hit. Like he spins. You have to worry a little bit about his chin. He got knocked out by Bobby Green, who's not really known for his power, but that was, he's got another win since then. Oh, it has been 2 wins. I can't remember.
He's had 2 wins since then. Yeah,
2 wins. I apologize. I like his lower. Like I'm pretty confident in his lower body striking game. Like I'm confident I have a read on that. He's got some good step in knees. He's got a big kicking game. Nice calf kicks. Go back to like the Mark Madsen fight. He really beat up Madsen with calf kicks. He beat up Nad Narimani, who I thought was a little underrated fighter, with some calf kicks. Despite what you think of his striking, has it improved or not? And I'm on the fence. His ultimate game plan is he wants to get the fight to the ground. Dawson's a good wrestler. He's got nice timing on his entries. He's also relentless to get to the fight to the ground if you stop his initial, attack. He's got really good hip control. He thinks about control before he's looking for submissions, before he's looking for damage. He really flattens his opponent out, works like the little inch game. He's got a good top game. He has no issue with stalling on top too. He'll stay there for long periods of time, though he does advance to better position. Carlos Diego Ferreira, I mean, I love this guy. He's one of these guys. Like, how could you not love this guy? I'm with you, dude. I gave up on him like 2 fights ago. I mean, he looked like he was done, and we are that guy. We don't accuse people of USADA. I mean, sometimes we've seen guys just have peaks and valleys, and he's looked really good. And the biggest thing that I think that stands out to me is he still has a chin. Like I thought his, when guys fade, their chin's going to be gone. Now he's small for the weight class, but he makes up for it with his output. He's got good output. He's got tight boxing. He works behind a jab. He'll double it up. He follows with straight shots down the pipe. I love his double jab right hand combo. That's kind of one of his go-to. He works the body really well, which is really smart for a guy who really wants to beat people with volume and cardio. It helps slow down his opponent. He is hittable though. He hits a lot of shots, which I said, he needs to still have that chin. He's got a good kicking game. Kicks everywhere, fast kicks. He will look to wrestle, but I don't think he's that good at it. He's definitely like a BJJ guy who wrestles, not in the sense that he can't get a takedown, but I definitely would give Dawson a big advantage in that. If he can get the fight to the ground, I mean, this guy's got some elite BJJ credentials. I mean, he's out, he's had really good moments in his career, though he also been out grappled by guys like Gregor Gillespie and Benil Dariush, but those are both guys who are not, Gillespie obviously is a wrestling style. But obviously he's an elite wrestler, and then Dariush is just such a big guy that was a lot of that had to do with being so much bigger than him. He does have 7 subs on his record. He showed great ground and pound in his last fight, and he's a guy it's weird because he's had elite cardio, like oh my gosh, and then he had times where during his skid he was gassing out, but his cardio was great again against Rebecki. So this is a really fun matchup. 2 guys I like. I've always been kind of high on Dawson. He's kind of like this big throwback type guy, kind of like a Jake Shields or a John Fitch, where, they're not the best athlete. They're not very good strikers, but they find ways to win. And I kind of put Dawson in that kind of category. I was quitting on Ferreira. He showed that he still has a lot left in tank. He's still a threat to anybody. I'm still leaning towards Dawson for 2 big reasons. One, I know he'll initiate his grappling. That's what I like about a guy who's a good grappler. He's a guy that he isn't the best athlete, but he tends to put himself in the best avenue for victory. And second, he's just so much bigger. I can't get that out of my mind. I mean, he's such an incredible grappler, great fighter, even more credentialed of the 2, but he's just so much smaller. I expect Dawson to outmuscle him. kind of big brother him in positions. I think it's going to look a lot like the Dariush fight, where Dariush was just too big and too strong. Give me Dawson by decision.
Next up at UFC 311 is a middleweight matchup between Zach Reese and Sedriques Dumas. Reese, the 30-year-old Texan, is 8-1 overall. He's 3-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7. Or sorry, he's 2-1 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost his debut quickly, under 2 minutes, as he got slammed and basically knocked out by Cody Brundage. But since then, he has back-to-back wins over Julian Marquez and Jose Medina. The most recent of those, the Medina fight, was last August at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Bajalio. So Reese is looking for his 3rd straight win in the UFC. He'll need to get past Dumas to do so. 29-year-old Floridian is 10-2 overall. He's 3-2 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of the Contender Series. He won his last time out. It was last August at UFC on ABC's Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov, where he took a unanimous decision over Dennis Chilulan. That allowed him to bounce back from a quick and frankly kind of humiliating knockout loss to Nursultan Ruzaboyev. Dumas is the underdog here. What is the line, do you think, Keith?
I'm going to say it's one of the closer ones. I'll say like Reese is like negative 130.
There are no fights from here on out with less than a 2-1 favorite, except for the 2 pick'ems. And this is not one of them. Reese is minus 260, Dumas plus 220.
So you keep like foreshadowing this, which means one of the top 3 fights line is way the fuck off.
I can't wait for us to get there. Yeah, Reese is minus 260, Dumas plus 220. And as much as I am inclined to root for Reese as a guy that trains at a local gym here, I know his coach, I like his coach, and to root against Dumas, he's a dirtbag with a long criminal record. Anytime that your post-fight interview in the octagon includes you screaming that you're not a woman hitter when nobody asked you about it, the wicked flea went on to it, dude.
You're laughing about that, but that's pretty funny.
But having said all that, I think the line should be closer.
I'll give you an example of I was interrogating someone. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to give too much. But I was interrogating a guy this week, and you talked to him for a little bit, and I was like, yeah, you're really nice fellow. And he's like, instantly, the guy's like, I didn't touch her. That's kind of the reaction. I'm like, damn, dude, you jump. Oh, you jumped to the conclusion already. I was building there, but holy moly, dude.
Oh, all right. Yeah, having said all that, I think the line should be closer here. Reese has some obvious routes.
Dude, I'm sorry. I apologize for cutting you. I've cut you off a lot tonight.
It's okay.
I was thinking about the top 3. Who's the favorite?
In this one?
This fight right here.
Oh,
I know you said it.
Yeah, Reese is minus 260, Dumas plus 220. And personal biases aside, I think the line should probably be closer because
absolutely.
Yeah, like they're physically very similar. They're both tall, long, lanky guys that
they can be
in a vacuum.
If you saw them at a club, you'd have a hard time picking out who's who, right?
Well, you'd be like, what is Sedriques Dumas doing at a country like dance club? Like they're both big, long, lanky guys that like to kickbox. But if I knew that these guys had made like a backstage pact that the floor is lava and nobody's taking anybody down, I'd probably take Dumas as the guy who's a little faster, has more one-shot power. But the thing is, of the two of them, Reese is a decent offensive wrestler and Dumas is still a terrible defensive wrestler. And I think that's the difference. Reese is pretty old to have as few fights as he does, but he's well coached and he has one loss in his entire career, and he showed up the one time that Cody Brundage decided to act like a former college wrestler. aside from that, Reese usually does put himself in the best positions to win. And the best position to win here is to get inside on Dumas, because while they're both long, lanky kickboxing types, Dumas is much more comfortable as an out striker, like trying to head kick people, jab, kick, use lateral movement. Reese needs to crash the pocket, find a way to bring this to the ground. If he does, I think he actually does have pretty easy sledding here. Dumas has shown lousy takedown defense and a get-up game that's mostly informed by him being big and strong. Like, not a whole lot of real technique to it. That may have improved, but I'll believe it when I see it. This is the kind of fight where I could be proven wrong in like 90 seconds if Dumas just decapitates Reese, but I don't see it. I think Reese doesn't mess around at range any longer than he absolutely has to. Closes the distance, puts Dumas on the back foot where he really doesn't like to be, looks for the takedown, and does work from there. Give me Reese by a stoppage late in the first round, ground and pound TKO probably.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked at length about how bad of a person Sedriques Dumas is. I'm not going to continue on that. The thing is, he's a terrible human. He's not that much better of a fighter, for being honest. I mean, he's a really big dude on the feet. He's a long and lengthy kickboxer. He is explosive. He closes the distance with big, long shots. Not the best volume. I mean, he's pretty low volume. He does hit hard. He throws a lot of kicks, hard kicks to the body, some good calf kicks. He has a lot of big.
Hits hard. Just ask the woman at that restaurant.
Oh my God! So people are like, "Whoa, why don't you let go the Dumas thing?" People didn't. Sherdog didn't. I wrote an article about, and I don't. You guys know I don't write a lot, but like I wrote an article about one of his domestic violence, and it actually wasn't domestic violence. This was a woman at a bar or restaurant. Sherdog refused to post a picture, and that's how bad it was what he did to this woman. So that we are an MMA website. I mean, we post pictures of people's eye sockets broken and stuff.
We posted pictures where you can see Gregory Rodriguez's like early childhood memories through the front of his head. And
of course, I mean, some of this obviously had to do with more legal than pure gore, but it wasn't just a girl with a black eye. That's what we'll say, which would be bad enough as it is. So we're not saying hit your woman lightly. So yeah, he hits hard. He throws a lot of kicks, hard kicks to the body, good calf kicks. He has a lot of big defensive issues. Biggest thing is he backs straight up. He's been cracked a lot. I mean, Nursultan Rozabayev cracked him. Josh Frem cracked him. I think we have a little different read on his wrestling. He will offensive wrestle a lot. He's a weak defensive wrestler, though. To his credit, he did stop some takedowns from Cody Brundage, which I'll take that for what it's worth. But he was still, even in a fight that he was dominating, he still got taken down. He has a few submissions on his record, but he does rush position. He got a good guillotine in the Contender Series. His cardio has been a huge issue in the past, though his last fight, it wasn't too bad. Zachary, he's also, like you mentioned, a big guy, long and lengthy. He can fight out of both stances. He's a very aggressive striker, and I think he's a more technical striker than Dumas. He's a pretty good boxer. He throws straight shots down the pipe. He attacks with combinations. He definitely has better output. I like his power. I mean, he showed his power against Julian Marquez. He has 5 TKOs. He does have some tall man's defense, backs his straight up, his chin's high in the air. I like his kicking game. He's got some long legs, mean body kicks. You talked about his wrestling. He will look for takedowns, like some body lock takedowns. He's a weaker defensive wrestler, but he does have 2 submissions. He moves well off his back. He got an armbar submission off his back. I think we have different reads, and I think you have a better read on Reese's game than me. I am a little worried about Reese's takedown defense, especially against, somewhat underrated wrestler in Dumas, offensive wrestler, I should say. However, I think I'm higher on Reese's striking than you are. I think he's a much better striker than I originally thought when he came in the UFC. Mm-hmm. I think he has more avenues of victory. I still think he can catch a catch the chin of Dumas, and he also could just out wrestle him. I'm going to go with you. I'm going to say he smashes Dumas. I'm going to say he lands a big shot and Reese puts him on the first round. Give me Reese by first round TKO.
Heavyweights take the cage next as Jailton Almeida and Serghei Spivac face off. Almeida, 33-year-old Brazilian, is 21-3 overall. He is 6-1 in the UFC since joining out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's 6-1 in the UFC. He's 5-1 at heavyweight, or above light heavyweight anyway. He debuted at light heavyweight, destroyed Danilo Marquez, moved up after that, and yeah, he's 5-1 since then. His only loss was last March to Curtis Blades, though in the interest of accuracy, it was a pretty lopsided loss, but he bounced back from that in June at UFC 302, mopping the cage with Alexander Romanov. So Almeida will look to continue building on that momentum against Spivac. Spivac, 29-year-old Moldovan, 17-4 overall. He's 8-4 in the UFC. He is coming in off a win as well. He headlined UFC on ESPN 61 last August, avenging an earlier loss to Marcin Tybura, just armbarring the perennial top 10 fighter in like a minute and 44 seconds. So Spivac erased a loss there. He's going to look to keep moving up in the heavyweight rankings. Have to get past Almeida to do it. Keith, Almeida is the favorite. What do you think the line is?
Well, I think it's going to be pretty big because you keep saying double. I'm going to say what I think it should be. I'd put Almeida like negative 180.
Jailton Almeida minus 400. Serghei Spivac plus 300. And I don't know. And again, the bookmakers, the odds makers, they're not pulling these numbers out of a hat. It's driven by the bettors. Their whole job, it's not really to pick who they think is going to win. It's to set a line that will bring in money on both sides.
Yeah.
But
they know way more than I do.
If this is where they had to set the line to bring in money on Spivac, where Spivac's paying out at plus 300, I was surprised. I was very surprised because, as I alluded to earlier when we were talking about Ailin Perez, Spivac is a vastly improved fighter over his time in the UFC. And it starts with the physical. When he debuted, he was this like 20, I think he was 24 at the time, kind of pudgy, tubby, bald Moldovan guy who was okay. He was a grindy wrestler, an ugly striker. Physically, he's transformed. He weighs about the same. He goes about 240, but
he's still the same height.
Yeah, same height, but yeah, he's not like Shane Carr when he didn't like shrink and grow from fight to fight. But like a physical transformation. If you tell me that he cut his body fat percentage by 2/3, I wouldn't be shocked. And because he's a heavyweight who wants to wrestle, that's made the rest of his game run better. I picked Tybura to beat Spivac again last August, even after acknowledging how much Spivac has improved while Tybura stayed mostly the same. I
don't think you did, Ben. I think you picked Spivac.
I did?
For some reason, I'm remembering you picked Spivac.
Well, smart me. Good.
I mean, you've been on the Spivac train. You're
the
line is setting you that I can't get your money.
Yeah.
They're waiting. They're trying to get Ben to bet on them.
Yeah. Never let it be said that I can't admit when I'm wrong, because, since coming around on Spivac, here's the thing.
What if Spivac and Ailin Perez had a kid together?
The kid would have its own gravitational field, that's for sure. Like, they need one hell of a, they need an extra large car seat for that kid, dude. Almeida is there's something about him that's almost like just a giant sized Jacare. And he's not the level of Jacare in terms of BJJ credentials. Jacare is one of the greatest grapplers of all time, period, within his weight range, one of the greatest grapplers to cross over to MMA. But in terms of Jacare's BJJ became very effective in MMA because he was so strong and so athletic that it allowed him to turn a pretty basic repertoire of techniques into a pretty consistent takedown game. There are very few people in Jacare's prime that he couldn't take down if he wanted to. And that's kind of how it is for Almeida. Like, I don't think he's a great technical wrestler. I think he's just realized that, okay, these are things that work for me. I'm strong enough to take 260-pound men and just kind of hoist them, dump them. Like, Derek Lewis is normally a hard guy to take down and a hard guy to keep down. And Almeida did both effortlessly for 5 rounds. Having said that, I don't think he can do that to Spivac. And I think Spivac is a better technical wrestler than Almeida is. Like, I could see a lot of this fight being contested on the feet. And like, neither of their striking is super pretty. Like, Almeida definitely hits harder on a shot for shot basis, but he also leaves himself much wider open on a regular basis. It's hard for me to pick this one, and it shouldn't be hard to pick a fight that has a 4-1 favorite in it. I sound like Keith right now, but I'm like, this feels like a pick 'em to me. I'm leaning very slightly towards Almeida. Like, I think if wrestling dictates who wins this fight, it's probably Almeida's takedown game early on.
Sure.
But I think the fact that it's only a 3-round fight probably favors him a little bit, because he was able to wrestle Derek Lewis for 5 rounds because Lewis, for some reason, put up like next to no resistance that fight. He'll get tired wrestling Spivac. Give me Almeida to win a close fight, maybe even like a split decision. And I think it's one where Spivac is probably the fresher fighter late. Like, if this thing goes the distance, it's Spivac kind of pouring it on in the last round, and maybe he gets his first takedown of the entire fight with like 2 minutes left, and it's, can Almeida hold on? Does Spivac get a 10-8 round? That kind of thing. Give me Almeida to win a close decision here, but I don't think this is going to look like a -400 +300 fight in the cage.
So it took maybe, I don't know how long we've been doing the show, 4 or 5 years now, but Ben has finally mastered the Shilin pick, where I talk about a fight should be much closer, and then I still take the favorite. But then no matter who wins, you can play of like, oh, I picked the favorite if they win. But if the underdog wins, like, see, I told you guys, this guy was a live dog. It's like, you got it down, Ben. That's very, very good. You had people on the edge of their seat ready for Ben to take the big upset of Spivac, and then you pull out the carpet on him the last minute. It was a very, very, very nice job. Funny, I'm shocked this fight is not on the main card, just because how the UFC feels about heavyweights, especially in a card that's loaded with the top 2 fights are lower weight class guys. I mean, he's a massive dude, long arms, long legs, 79-inch reach. His striking has improved, but I mean, there's still huge areas of growth needed. I still view him as a pretty one-dimensional fighter. Obviously, due to his size, he has some pop, but still nothing special. He throws a lot of kicks, like got some good teep kicks, got some good calf kicks. He doesn't care if you try to catch his leg when he throws it, because he wants to grapple anyways. He's a good wrestler. I wasn't too sure about it. Because early in his career, he was wrestling guys without a background, but he's got some good entries, but he'll shoot without a setup. But what impressed me is he ended up losing to Curtis Blades, and that's not a knock, because Curtis Blades is top 5 heavyweight for a very long time now. But I was impressed that he was able to get a takedown against Curtis Blades pretty early. He slammed Shamil Abdurakhimov, which was a pretty good takedown. He's got great top control. He's a guy who worked inch by inch before securing a position. Easy advances on the ground. He has no issue stalling on top, or really stalling in any position. I mean, a perfect example is the Derek Lewis fight. Yeah, Lewis didn't give him much back, but he also didn't really take a lot of chances. He'll backpack and do absolutely nothing, and he's okay with that. He has a great mat return game. He's got some great back takes. He's got 13 subs on his record. He can kind of get sub anywhere, including off of his back. He can hit sweeps over back, but he will play BJJ a little too long. So if Spivac takes him down, if he's on top, he's got some really good ground and pound when he lets his hands go. Daniel Marquez, Jersey Universe Strike, he really beat them up with ground and pound. Move over to Spivac. He's not a punch ball anymore, but he still isn't a great athlete. That's why he struggled with the speed of a guy like, Serghei. Now, you talked about the Tybura fight. He was in fantastic shape. I mean, even the commentators were talking about how good he looked in that Tybura fight. I think he's a better striker than he's credited with, but he's still not a good striker. But he might have the advantage in this fight, as you kind of alluded to. I do agree that Almeida maybe hits harder, but Spivac, he has that little jab. I mean, he beat up Carlos Felipe with that jab. He follows it with 1-2. So he'll toss out some kicks, but they're pretty basic. I hate his defense, though. He lacks head movement. He kind of just pillars, which makes him very hittable. That's how he got battered by Gon. He's a good wrestler, but I think you put his wrestling much higher than I do. I think his wrestling is still a little overrated. He struggled to take – I keep going back to the same fight. But he struggled to take Serghei Gon back in a fight that's, somewhat of a good stylistic matchup for him. He will shoot for entries, but he's not that good at them. He's more of a better off like getting close inside, looking for snatch singles, more of a grinder, getting the clinch, wearing on his opponent. He can get some takedowns with, in the slapping titties positions, look for some foot sweeps, look for some throws. He loves headlocks and lateral drops, which, I hate, especially considering it's light heavyweight. He does that, and if he goes for like a headlock and gives Almeida his back, he could be in trouble. And he's one of these guys, he'll try like a judo throw and gives up his back. When the fight gets to the ground, he's good. Like he's good on the ground. He's a good ground and pound. He's got 7 submission wins. We saw him pull off a slick armbar in his last fight.
When was the last time a top 10 like heavyweight in the UFC threw up an armbar off his back?
Frank Mir.
I was thinking Mir, Verdum, somebody like that, like 10 years. Yeah, it was wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there might be someone I'm thinking of, but yeah, that it's been a long, long time.
Yeah.
So, armbars in general is even though we just saw 2 of them yesterday, but it's kind of a dying technique in MMA. But at heavyweight, absolutely, you better find a leprechaun in the cage than than an armbar from a heavyweight. So as far as prediction goes, Spivac is a lot like Almeida. I just think he's the poorer version. I think Almeida's the better athlete. I think he's the better wrestler, which I think a lot of people might disagree with me on that. I think he's the better submission artist. I say he takes Spivac down. I think he backpacks him for big portions of the fight. Spivac has never been subbed, so I don't think he will. I think we might get a lot of grimy clinching and Almeida just winning some positions. I think this might be a pretty boring fight. Give me Almeida by decision.
Second from the top of the UFC 311 undercard, perhaps the hottest prospect in the UFC, Payton Talbott, looks to stay perfect against Raoni Barcelos. Talbott, the 26-year-old Nevada native, is 9-0 as a professional. He is 3-0 since joining the UFC out of Season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought twice last year. The most recent of them was at UFC 303 in June, where he knocked out Yanis Gamuri in 19 seconds. Sensational finish. Confirmed his status as, again, one of the more exciting young fighters in the entire organization. He will look to continue building on that momentum and on that hype going into the new year against the veteran Barcelos. 37-year-old Brazilian is 18-5 overall. He is 7-4 in the UFC, and he is coming in off a win. He fought just once last year. It was back in February at UFC Fight Night Moreno versus Royval 2, where he tapped out Christian Quinones in the 3rd round. That has him at least shifting a little bit the momentum of a stretch where he went 1-4 in his 5 fights previous to that and was starting to look a little bit shop-worn. Here he will try to ruin the day of one of the hotter young fighters in the organization. Keith, Your favorite is minus 1,200. Your underdog is plus 750. Who are they?
Yeah. Obviously, Talbott. I mean, that's crazy. I was waiting, I kind of wrote some. If you keep me looking, I started writing some numbers next to the guy's name to kind of, because sometimes you ask me like, what's the odds, and I have a hard time like coming up with that. So I kind of was doing a little, thinking about it beforehand, and I was like, well, he's probably going to be really big based on what you've already told me. But I was like, what it should be? I was like, I don't know, negative 180. And he said 1,000 or something. What did you say?
Minus 1,200, and that's bargain shopping. Like good sites crazy. Like Bet US and Bovada, which are two of the bigger ones, have them at minus 1,500.
Yeah, they would be even. So they're one of the biggest betting sites. They would be the biggest betting site if they started sponsoring the show. Just so if anybody has an insight in those, let them know they're missing out.
Like, here's the thing I'll say about this. Barcelos for me is kind of in the same boat as Diego Ferreira. Barcelos was on a skid where, on the one hand, he wasn't losing to bad fighters. Timur Valiev, Victor Henry, Umar Nurmagomedov, Kyler Phillips, all very good fighters.
Yeah.
Like Henry might be the only one of them that wasn't a top 15-ish talent at the time he fought them. So it's not like he was losing to bad fighters. The thing that was discouraging was that he looked diminished. The things that made his game go in 2019 seemed to be slipping. And for him, it was surprisingly effective offensive wrestling, athleticism, good power, good durability. All that seemed to be abandoning him. And then in the Christian Quinones fight, he looked pretty damn great.
Yeah.
And that turns this from a squash match into a kind of sneaky trap fight. Like Talbott, if Talbott is as advertised, and for the record, I think he is, he should wash Barcelos. Even the resurgent Barcelos that we saw against Christian Quinones last year. Like Talbott is way bigger, like so much faster, throws insane volume, good power. Like it's an easy comparison to make because they're both like long, lanky bantamweights with wild hair, but he's a little bit more, he's like kind of like a more reckless Sean O'Malley. Like he doesn't have like that Matrix-like vision, but in terms of the techniques that work just because he is that long and that fast, it's that kind of thing. Just it's going to be eye-popping highlights for as long as we have Talbott around. But what he lacks, at least at this point in his development, that O'Malley has always had, is defensive soundness. Like it's been possible for people to get a hand on Talbott, and unless he knocks him out in 19 seconds. Barcelos has tight boxing, hits really hard. I mean, Barcelos might actually be the harder hitter on a shot for shot basis, but Talbott's he's going to outthrow him like 3-1 and outland him 3-1.
Yeah. And
Barcelos' best route to victory here would be to test Talbott's ground game. Like he hasn't really had to do it in the UFC. People have been just a little too his opponents, I mean, have been just a little too blown away by just the furious attack that he launches as soon as the fight starts. Barcelos is enough of a veteran that maybe he's not intimidated. Maybe he's not like flustered by that at all. If he's resurgent physically like he seemed to be last year, there's the possibility he could take Talbott down, and we see what it looks like when Talbott has to work back to his feet, has to defend himself off his back. But those are all outside possibilities for me. Just if Barcelos wins this, it probably is because he just catches Talbott with a 1 in a million punch in a wild exchange, puts Talbott on skates, and then is able to take him down and take advantage while Talbott's maybe hurt. And that sounds like something that you should get, plus 750 for if you bet on. Give me Talbott to take another impressive step forward. Barcelos is super durable. Like even during his run where he was not looking great, he was dragging the misery out to the final horn. Give me Talbott in just a really, really lopsided decision, like where maybe there's a 10-8 round in there, a near finish, but again, he just outlands Barcelos like 3 or 4 to 1. Barcelos goes like 0 for 6 on takedown attempts, and it's just a whooping.
Yeah, it takes years off his life, kind of performance.
Exactly.
I mean, Talbot. I mean, the guy, he really is one of the top prospects in the game. I mean, his level of athleticism is like Michel Pereira level. I mean, it's off the charts. Very creative in his attacks. He fights with the most unbelievable volume. I mean, possibly the highest output I've seen maybe ever. Right? It's his cardio is just, it's like a full sprint for 15 minutes. It's nonstop moving. He's a guy. I mean, he's so mentally strong. He beats like people. He beats him in volume. But he also just like mentally beats the guy, and he reminds me of if you ever watch Bo Bassett wrestle, where he's just on the gas and getting guys like machine gun mentality, where it's like, I can fight this way and you're not gonna be able to, and I'm gonna win, and that's what he does. No, he's got some skills. Don't get me wrong. Like he's not just throwing a lot of punches. He's got quick hands. He's an accurate striker. He's constantly attacking with combinations. He throws a lot of tight, hard hooks. He's got 7 TKOs, and he's at the age where he's really just kind of coming into his power now. I like a lot of his lower body attacks. His step-in knees are really fun. He'll throw some spinning wheel kicks. This is a guy, I've said before, he doesn't care about getting hit. I mean, I've seen better defense on power slap than this guy has. Yeah, he's one of these guys. He's willing to he's gonna be fun. I just don't know how long of a career he's gonna have because he's willing to eat a punch to land. Like his thing is, I'll eat one punch because I'm gonna land a 4-punch combination back. He just walks through punches. Eventually, he's gonna get cracked and get knocked out. He's very heavy on his front foot, which leaves him open to be calf kicked. He doesn't wrestle much. He's a weaker defensive wrestler, but he pops right back up to his feet, which is impressive. Barcelos, as he's gotten older, his volume has dropped. But he's still pretty intelligent. He's somehow slowed the pace down, and he has this like Andrei Arlovsky type thing going on with him, where he can get guys to kind of technically have a distant kickboxing game, which he wants on the feet. He's a technically sound striker. His last fight, he kept his hands pretty wide, which was surprising. But he's a slip and rip guy. He's got decent hand speed. We saw that against Trevin Jones. He fakes, like he kept throwing this like fake jab low and then followed with a straight overhand right over the top, which I really liked. He showed he still has, a lot of power. You probably have the power a little higher than I do, but like I agree with your general statement that when you think of guys who can hit hard, he's not a guy that gets in a lot of credit. Now, he doesn't check leg kicks, even though he has a big kicking game himself. He has some hard calf kicks, but go back to Umar Nurmagomedov kicking his leg off. Again, you're talking about the guy who's fighting for the title. So he mixes striking and wrestling together really well. I'd say he's an okay wrestler. I've said this before about him. He's kind of like a BJJ practitioner trying to wrestle. He is hard to take down himself. He's a really good grappler, though. If he gets you down, good top game, good back takes. I've said before, at his prime, he out-grapples Said Nurmagomedov, excuse me. He is a submission threat. You got to be a little worried about his chin at this age. I mean, Umar Nurmagomedov knocked him out with a really short, tight right. Also a little worried about his cardio as he slowed down in the past. So, yeah, Talbot is a huge favorite, but the one concern I have is this is a huge step up in competition for Talbot. I mean, this is definitely the best guy he's fought. Because of his reckless style, he could walk right into takedowns. I still just think like he'll work ways back to his feet. We've seen him get in trouble so far in the UFC on the Contender Series where he has moments, but it doesn't stop him. He can pop right back to his feet. And he gets that little open and he's just like going. And I just think that gas is just too much, that insane output. I think the pressure takes over. I say he might even lose the first round, and then he wins the second. And by the third, he finishes him with volume and output and mentally breaks him. Give me Talbot by third round TKO.
Next up at UFC 311, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the scheduled top prelim is a light heavyweight scrap between Bogdan Guskov and late replacement Billy Elikana. Guskov, the 32-year-old from Uzbekistan, is 16-3 overall. He's 2-1 in the UFC. He made his debut in September of 2023, getting tapped out in the first round by Volkan Oezdemir. But since then, he's perfect with stoppage wins over Zach Pauga last February and Ryan Spann last April at UFC on ESPN, Nicolau versus Perez. So he'll look to make it 3 in a row, which in the modern UFC light heavyweight division pretty much puts him on the cusp of the top 15. He had been scheduled to take on Johnny Walker, but Walker withdrew last week with an illness. In steps the debuting Billy Elikana. 29-year-old Californian is 7-1 overall. I mentioned, obviously, this will be his UFC debut, but he was a standout in LFA as well as a winner on the PFL Challenger Series back in 2023. He won on the Challenger Series, but didn't end up actually getting signed to the PFL's regular roster. At any rate, Guskov, unsurprisingly, is the favorite here. Keith, what do you think the line is?
I don't think I didn't make the PFL, but he still has more fights in the PFL than like Pitbull does. Guskov's a big favorite, like -400.
Keith swings too far the other way. Guskov is -300. Elikana right. +250. All right. And here's the thing. When Guskov, and I feel like there are like a half dozen fighters on this card I have to say this about, where I'm like, I don't get why this fighter was signed to the UFC. They're not very good. Then they lost their first fight. I'm like, see, I was right. And I had to revise things because then they started winning. You know, we said that already about Ailin Perez, about Serghei Spivac. Here's the thing with Guskov. He lost his first fight in the UFC and he's won 2 since then, but I still don't think he's very good. Getting beaten by Volkan Oezdemir in 2023 is not a great look no matter what, but getting tapped out for like Oezdemir's first submission win in, I think it was something like 10 years or 12 years. Yeah. Definitely not a good look. He has back-to-back KOs of Zach Pauga and Ryan Spann at this point, but one, Pauga's not all that good. And two, Spann was whooping him. Like Spann like beat Guskov's ass bad in the first round. Then he went all Ryan Spann in the second round, and you know, Guskov got, like, you know, credit to him. That's a good win. And it's a win over a guy in Spann that has flirted with the edges of the top 10 from time to time. So it's a good win on paper, but I came out of it not feeling any better about Guskov's actual prospects to move forward. It's a shame because, you know, I had been ready to talk about Guskov versus Johnny Walker, where I'm like, this is going to be like the Spann fight all over again, where Walker should be thrashing Guskov, and it's just the question of, can Guskov hang around until Walker self-destructs? Now we have a whole different dynamic. Guskov might be the more talented guy here, but I thought it was interesting that Guskov debuted in the UFC against Volkan Oezdemir, because I think he's kind of a poor man's Oezdemir. Like, he's not the tallest light heavyweight, but he's just built like a tank. Like Oezdemir, he's a guy that presents as a kickboxer, but in practice in the cage, it's pretty bread and butter stuff. A basic repertoire of techniques that he throws really hard. Like Oezdemir, you know, had big power in both hands and threw really hard kicks, but, you know, struggled, like not great defensively, didn't throw in combination as much as you'd like. Just Oezdemir was like a big, fun slugger. I think that's what Guskov kind of tops out at here. And because of that, there's some upset potential. Like, looking at Elikana's fights in PFL as well as LFA, I don't think he's a real standout at anything. Like, he's a decent sized, but not a huge light heavyweight. He looks like a decent athlete. He's reasonably well-rounded, but one thing I noticed is he's pretty good about seeing where his advantage is and kind of trying to steer the fight there. Like in his fight in PFL, You know, he was good at wrestling when his opponent wanted to strike, striking when his opponent wanted to wrestle. And because of that, it was two guys that I think were about, you know, roughly the same talent level. And Elikana won all three rounds easily. Just he was always a step ahead of him. Just better tactics, better game planning in the moment. Having said that, he's stepping up on short notice. Guskov, even if Guskov is a middling UFC light heavyweight, he is much, much better than anyone Elikana has fought so far. And the opposite is not true. Guskov has fought multiple, you know, former top 10, top 15 fighters. I think this is going to be a great night for Bogdan Guskov. I think his general game plan, which is to plod forward and, you know, throw his 1-2, throw like maybe some hard kicks at the leg and body, are going to work on Elikana. I think Elikana is probably going to try to take Guskov down. We'll see if it works. I don't think we're going to get there, though. I think Guskov is going to mug Elikana. Give me Guskov by first round TKO here. Not because I think he's great, as I think I made clear here, but just he's a huge step up for Elikana. Elikana's coming in on short notice. All the variables favor Guskov. Unless he really, really like craps the bed here, I think he gets a highlight reel knockout.
Yeah, Guskov. I mean, I think I'm a little higher on him than you are. I think he's a pretty decent striker. He throws straight shots down the pipe. He has big power. I mean, he's got 14 TKOs in his career. He loves the same side attack, which like he'll throw like back-to-back 2 straight right crosses, which is so unique. He does need to clean up his defense. He keeps his chin a little too high, though he does have pretty good head movement. He has been cracked though, like Volkanus to me, like everyone remembers him getting submitted, which is obviously really bad, but he also was hurt bad before that. It was kind of like a club and sub kind of type situation. He has been improving his takedown defense, but I'd still put it on the porous side. If he gets on top, he's got some good mean ground and pound. If he's on bottom, he is his submission defense is an issue. As you mentioned, he was subbed by Oestermeer, which, you know, isn't really known for his high level grappling. I didn't see that Elikana jumped in, so I kind of rushed last minute. So I don't feel like I have the last, real strong read on him because I jumped in the last minute just to get, a couple of fights in as quick as possible. What I've seen, he guy fights out of both stances. I think he's better in the southpaw stance. He sets up his strikes with feints well. Low output striker though, throws way too many single strikes. He wants to work from distance. Doesn't like being pressured. He backs straight up. He does throw straight shots, which I like, but he lacks power. He doesn't really crack for a big guy. He'll throw out some calf kicks. He likes those John Jones oblique kicks. I haven't seen much of his offensive grappling, but his takedown defense is pretty solid. Like I said, I scrambled kind of last minute, Elikana, just to get something. I like Guskov. What I've seen, I think he's a much better striker. I say he takes the fight right to Elikana. I say he catches his chin. I say he does in the second round. Give me Guskov by second round to go.
The 5-fight main card of UFC 311 opens with a middleweight contest between Kevin Holland and Reinier de Ridder. Holland, the 32-year-old Texan, I believe fighting out of California, is 26-12 with 1 no contest overall. He is 13-9 with 1 no contest in the UFC since joining out of season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. Having said that, he is 9-5 with 1 no contest at middleweight, or at least above welterweight, including that 180-pound catchweight fight with Khamzat Chimaev. So he's 9-5 with 1 no contest, kind of in this weight range. He is coming in off a loss. He fought at UFC 307 last October, where he got hammered into a stoppage between rounds by Roman Dolidze. He will be back here looking to get back on track and kind of looking to turn around a skid of 3 losses in his last 4 outings against de Ridder. De Ridder, 34-year-old from the Netherlands, 18-2 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as a former 2-division champ in one championship. He made his debut last November at UFC Fight Night Magny versus Prates, tapping out Gerald Meerschaert in the 3rd round. So having announced his presence, he's going to look to announce himself as a contender, and beating Kevin Holland is still a pretty good stepping stone to that kind of shine. This is one of the 2 pick'ems on the card. Both guys are out there, minus 110, dead even. And this is the funny thing to me. This card is full of really, really wide lines that both of us seem to agree should be narrower in most cases. And this fight's a pick'em, and I'm mildly surprised that De Ridder isn't kind of a comfortable favorite. Here's the thing. Like, I feel as though we have a pretty good handle on who Kevin Holland is now. He has more or less come out and explicitly said that he wants to be the, 170, 185 pound Donald Cerrone. He would just much rather be in anyone, anytime, any place fighter, fight for bonuses rather than, try to work his way up the actual rankings. Because of that, I don't even know if it's because of that. Maybe they're 2 separate phenomena that just sort of contribute to making Kevin Holland, but he will often fight for entertainment rather than fighting to his best advantage. Like, his star-making moment during that year of COVID, when he became the first fighter to win 5 fights in the UFC in a calendar year, where he knocked out Jacare off the seat of his pants. He came off as being so in the zone there, where he's sitting, he's laughing as Jacare is like over him and saying, I had a dream about this last night. Next thing you know, he knocks Jacare out. If he had not done that, and Jacare is arm triangling him 45 seconds later, that would go down as his like hello Japan moment, and he would be one of the most mocked and reviled fighters in the modern history of the UFC.
Yeah.
Kudos to Holland for daring to be great. He was taking a risk there, but we've seen him kind of goof around in fights he was losing. We've seen him try to lose fights, try to win fights and end up losing anyway because of his takedown defense. I think the end of his kind of title aspirations came when in back-to-back fights, Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori kind of big brothered him. I think that's the kind of performance that De Ridder is going to be able to pull off on him. Like, De Ridder lost some shine just because he got absolutely mauled in back-to-back fights by Anatoly Malikin in one championship. He'd lost both of his belts in consecutive fights. The first one was a beatdown of the year candidate, and the second one was actually even worse of a beatdown. But Anatoly Malikin probably outweighed him by 30 pounds and is just an absolute tank and a bruiser of a man. Aside from that, De Ridder's capable of taking care of himself on the feet and kind of hard to hurt. Like, he beat a lot of much bigger people than himself on the way up to that, including some people that are good fighters. Aung La, Vitaly Bigdash. And offensively, he is a very good grappler. His takedown game, it's a judo-driven takedown game. He's a 6'4" middleweight. He's not shooting from the outside. He's using his tall frame to, get an overhook, get an underhook, toss people, trip them. And then, sensational grappler, just moves, like passes guard easily, takes the back. Sometimes it seems before his opponents even really know what he's doing. Great at cinching up rear naked chokes. For Holland, for me to feel comfortable about Holland's chances to beat De Ridder, I have to know that, okay, Holland is going to try to avoid the ground at all costs, fight from the outside. This is going to be one of the few times where Holland is the shorter guy and they have comparable reach, but use his superior speed and just pity pat De Ridder from the outside and win at least 2 out of 3 rounds that way. But Holland is terrible at dictating the terms of the fight. Like DeRitter is going to want to throw a few strikes from outside and then clinch. And I just don't trust Holland not to go there with him. And if they go to the ground, I think DeRitter actually makes it pretty elementary. Holland is a surprisingly good grappler, but DeRitter is a great MMA grappler. Yeah, like I'm surprised that this one's a pick'em because Holland's routes to victory involve either slim, fluky things happening or Holland buckling down to a game plan in a way that we rarely see him do. I'm not picking either of those things to happen, so I'm pretty comfortable taking DeRitter here, and I'm going to say he taps him out. DeRitter's back take game, like, I think something probably happens like it's kind of a wild first round, but then in the second round, DeRitter gets him down in the first 90 seconds, and Holland just can't survive for 3.5 minutes with DeRitter trying to get on his back. Give me DeRitter by second round submission here.
Yeah, this is such a weird fight. I mean, any Kevin Holland fight is kind of a weird fight. I'm kind of sick of breaking him down. He's got. I think we've asked this before. We've had to break down Kevin Holland's fights more than anybody, and I still don't think I have a good read on the guy because he's so unorthodox and goes by, what they say, go by the beat of his own drum. He's a good athlete. He's long and lengthy middleweight. He covers distance super quickly due to his long legs. He's got some quick hands. He's accurate. He works behind an up jab. I think he's got better power than you think, though he isn't a KO artist. He avoids strikes by rolling with punches, which never looks good. He also pulls his head straight back. But to his credit, he doesn't really get tagged up that much. And he has a great chin. I mean, say what you want. He's been blasted by some great strikers and just kind of never really been too hurt on the feet. Kicks are a big part of his game. He likes to keep distance with the kicks. He's got a great high kick. Good at following his kicks into the pocket and land some shots. He uses his size well in the clinch. I've said it before, like he gets inside and he'll start like boxing up the ears, which hurts way more than people think. He hits knees in the clinch super easy because of his length. He isn't a strong offensive grappler, but he's an offensive wrestler, but he's a really good grappler though. Or more, I should say, like an opportunistic grappler. I mean, his armbar against Michelle Osejek was slick. He caught Tim Means and Mike Kukiesa with beautiful Darce chokes. Now the problem is he's not small for middleweight. He's just not one of the bigger guys, and he's a weak defensive wrestler. We saw it in the past, and it's been a really long time, but he hasn't really faced anybody like this since. But Derek Brunson, Marvin Vettori, these bigger, hulking middleweights to be able to take him down, hold him down. Though to his credit, he showed much improved takedown defense against Michael Chiesa. But again, you're talking about a welterweight, who used to be a lightweight, which different story. But he struggled to get back to his feet, and worse is not that he can't get back to his feet, but he shows no urgency to get back to his feet. If he's on top, he's got good ground and pound. Now, DeRitter, you're much higher on him than I am. I've never been that big of a DeRitter guy. I view him as a very one-dimensional fighter. Like and that just because I don't think he's a good athlete. I think he's a terrible athlete. Now he's tough as hell. I'll say that. He can take a beating. He's massive for the division. He's a big guy. He's tall. He's big, but he's not a good athlete. He's a southpaw that I think is very limited on the feet. I think his hands are slow. I think they aren't technical. He throws a basic 1-2 combination. He doesn't really have any punching power for a guy who's so big. He doesn't have a good kicking game. He throws some teep kicks. And again, he doesn't care if you grab his legs because he wants to grapple. And he will land more than you think because his opponents are worried about his grappling. He's got good entries, okay entries, but he's relentless to get the fight to the ground. He's constantly shooting. He's got a great top game. He stays glued to his opponent, controls really well, doing all the little stuff, grabbing the post, hooks, the ankles. He's got good back takes. He's constantly working with a sub. He's got 13 subs on his record. He just subbed Gerald Meerschaert, which is a hell of a feat. But if you put him on his back, he does struggle to get back to his feet himself. I I think he should move up to light heavyweight. I think that weight cut. I mean, he got a submission against Gerald Meerschaert, but he also looked really gassed out in that fight. Holland's going to have to use his movement, speed, stay on the outside, outstrike Dorita, which I like how you said that he doesn't stick to a game plan that's clearly there. He does want to be more entertaining. Dorita has a clear avenue for victory, and this fight could exactly look like Holland's fight, like you said, against Brunson, against Vettori, where that was a really long time ago. I do still think this is the best stylistic matchup for Dorita for guys close to the top of the division, not your Gerald Meerschaert, your mid-card guys. I'm talking about like your main event level guys. So I feel like this is a really big opportunity, and I really think it's his best. Like we were talking yesterday about Roman Kopylov possibly becoming a champion and what's the percentages and all that. Yeah. Dorita is a guy who's ranked very high, which I don't view on the same, like having a good chance of winning the title. I'd be very surprised if he wins the UFC title. If he could, if he, like, I feel like there's two really, like the most likely outcome is Dorita takes him down, holds him down, finds a submission. But I'm really worried about that weight cut, the cardio. I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to say for once, Holland sticks and moves, pieces him up. I think he's going to have such a big advantage on the feet. I think Dorita slows down, gasses out a little bit. And I think I could see like Holland catching a knee inside, rocking him. I agree. Like he's not going to knock him out cold, but I could see him like hurting him, getting in a dominant position, following up with big strikes. Give me Holland. I'm going to say Holland wins by third round TKO.
All right. We have not just disagreement, but finishes going both ways. Tune in for the recap to see who gets the last laugh. I'm just kidding. We'll both be laughing. Lightweights are up next on the UFC 311 main card as Beneil Dariush and Renato Moicano square off. Oh, I'll introduce them first. Dariush, 35-year-old American of Iranian/Assyrian descent, 22-6-1 overall. He is 16-6-1 in the UFC. He was a sneaky rising title contender up until about 2 years ago, but tables have turned. He lost his last two fights in the octagon. They were both in 2023. He got knocked out by Charles Oliveira and Arman Sarukian, then took all of 2024 off. He tore a meniscus. I forget which knee it was, but that kept him on the shelf for most of 2024. So he's stepping back into the cage here for the first time in about 13 months and getting no softballs at all as he is faced with the resurgent Renato Moicano Carneiro. 35-year-old Brazilian is 25-1 overall. He is 12-5 in the UFC. Worth noting that while he's 12-5 in the UFC, he is 7-2 since moving up from featherweight. He is another guy that inexplicably spent a big stretch of his early career at featherweight. Since moving up to 155, and I think there's 150 or 160 pound catch weight fight in there. But anyway, 7-2 since moving up from featherweight. And he's on a 4-fight win streak, dating back a little over 2 years, but he fought 3 times last year, picking up wins over Drew Dober, Jalen Turner, and Benoit Saint-Denis. All 3 of those restaurant quality wins, giving him time on the mic to embrace the star he was always meant to be. It's been a hell of a ride over the past 12 to 14 months with Mr. Money Moicano. And he steps into this fight as your favorite. What do you think the line is, Keith?
Well, I mean, I think it should be close. It's not going to be. I would have Moicano like -110 if I was betting the line, but
which would make it probably close to a pick 'em.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it is not the case, as Moicano is -200, Dariush +160.
Okay.
Here's an interesting thing, and maybe it's just genetics, maybe it's wear and tear, who knows, but these guys have a lot in common. They're both 35 years old, and they're within like 2 weeks of each other's birthday. They're almost the same age. They have roughly the same number of career fights. They both have, between 25 and 30 career fights. They both joined the UFC in 2014. Like they've both been in the UFC for going on 11 years. But one of them appears to be hitting the skids, and the other is, right now, Moicano's ranked as high as he's ever been. His visibility is as high as it's ever been.
Yeah.
And it's got to be genetics, because Dariush is getting gray and grizzled in front of us, while Moicano is talking about his 80-year-old dad still fathering kids. So I do love this fight. Like, this is a fight that I just mentioned. These guys have both been in the UFC for over a decade. And while Moicano was a featherweight for the first couple of years, they've both been rising contenders in the same weight class for like 6 or 7 years now. It's mildly surprising that they never fought each other. And I would have been happy to see these guys fight at any point, since Moicano moved up. I'm happy to see it now. Because it should be pretty great no matter what we get. If these guys decide to grapple, they're two of the best grapplers of their era in this weight range in the UFC. If they decide to strike, they're two of the more underrated strikers, I think, because they're thought of as grapplers in the UFC over that same time period. Dariush, obviously an outstanding Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, but also he's found a striking game, at least until fairly recently, that really worked for him. It took advantage of the fact that he's a big guy. It covered for the fact that he's not the fastest or most athletic, but just took advantage of his size, his power, and the fact that most of his opponents were watching for the takedown. He's a hard hitter. Moicano, we talked about this before on previews. For a guy he just got his first 2 TKO wins of his career in his last 2 fights. So, up until he fought Turner and Santini, you'd see this guy with, 10 submissions and 0 knockouts on his record, and you're thinking Damian Maia or Jussier Formiga, but he's not. He's been a good striker with decent power for a while, and it never quite played out that he stopped anybody with strikes. I think I've made this comparison before, but there's a lot about Moicano that just makes me think of not even a poor man's, like that sounds insulting, but just like maybe a slightly downgraded Charles Oliveira, where all the similarities. A guy with a big frame that kind of wasted too much of his early career trying to make 145. A guy that was always a better offensive striker than people thought, but definitely had defensive liabilities, and then just a sensational grappler. And, Moicano maybe just a tick behind in each of those categories. I think it's awesome that he's finally getting some shine. He's been a fun guy for many, many years, and all of a sudden he's in the title picture.
Yeah.
His last 4 wins, Brad Riddell and Drew Dober, were both, at least thought of as like borderline top 15 guys at the time. Then sure. Jailton Turner and Benoit Santini. If things play out right, trashing Dariush could be a fight that has Moicano like waiting on a call for, like a short notice, like title fight. 5 straight wins, the last 3 of them over top 10 type guys. Fantastic stuff. I've talked, I think, for like 3 or 4 minutes now, and I haven't even said anything about who I'm picking, but I kind of tipped my hand right off the beginning. These guys are about the same age. They theoretically have about the same amount of tread off the tires, but Dariush just feels like he's starting to get old. And there's no shame in losing to Charles Oliveira and Arman Sarukian. Like, I mean, they were both top five. Yeah, they were both top five fighters when they beat him.
They might be top three right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Sarukian is fighting for the title this same night, and Oliveira is always within scouting distance.
He's fighting the winner. Yeah,
but he's even before then he seemed to be slowing down just a tick. Whereas Carnero just seems to be moving from strength to strength here. It's anyone's guess what happens if this thing goes to the ground with both fighters, like neither fighter compromised, like hurt or tired or anything. And honestly, if Dariush gets Carnero down while they're both fresh, so that he's settling in, in top position, I think that's going to be trouble for Moicano. Like Moicano is a great grappler, and he's a great grappler off his back, but nobody is as good off their back as Dariush is from on top. Like I don't care how old Dariush is. He's bigger. He's like naturally bigger.
Sure.
When he feels like it, that same like punching power he has on the feet, he brings to the ground. But like that's Dariush's best route to victory. If the more time this spends on the feet, the more I think Moicano probably marks Dariush up. I think he's going to look a lot faster. I think he's going to throw a lot more volume. He doesn't hit as hard shot for shot, but again, he hits harder than people think he does. I think Moicano beats Dariush up good, and I'm going to say he gets a TKO on the ground here late. Give me Moicano by third round TKO on the ground. Dariush will keep this interesting for a while, but I don't trust his durability at this point. And coming back from a pretty major knee injury, I think he's going to be, if anything, slowed down even more from kind of how he seemed to be trending in 2021 through 2023. Give me Moicano to recover from a fun first round and just really start snowballing. And I think Dariush will be pretty beat up and pretty spent by the time the finish comes in the third round.
Yeah, this rise of Moicano it is as fun as anybody I can remember. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'm all for it right now. I mean, the guy's a well-rounded fighter. You talk about his kickboxing. He's a good, solid kickboxer on the feet, kind of a hold your ground type striker, has solid boxing, nice crisp jab, likes to kind of point from distance, but then when he steps inside, I agree with you. He has underrated power in his hands. It was forever ago, but when he lets his kicks go, he's a problem. And like it was his biggest weapon against Calvin Kattar. He murdered Calvin Kattar with calf kicks, though he's really abandoned that tool recently. My concern I have Moicano is he has been hurt a lot, and moving up a weight class seemed to have helped him. But I mean, he was knocked out by Jose Aldo, the Korean Zombie. Rafael Fiziev blasted him. RDA beat him up. Even like think about the win against Jailton Turner, the damage where he was almost knocked out. He's a solid wrestler for a guy who doesn't have a wrestling background. Very good, like grappling skills, great back takes, smothering top control, mean ground and pound. And he's a submission threat. He's got 10 subs. Dariush, he's a southpaw, high outputs on the feet, constantly moving forward with really no regard for what's getting thrown back to him. He has really good power. He kind of wings his overhand left. He's got mean kicks to the body and loves his high kick, especially against like orthodox fighters. I love his stepping knees that he was hitting against Mateusz Gamrot, which was pretty incredible. That was one of his better performances. What has held him back is his defensive issues. He keeps his chin really high in the air. He doesn't move his head, and I don't know if he still has a chin anymore. He's one of these guys. He's willing to eat a shot to land one of his own, and obviously, as he's aged, he's playing with fire. He is also open to leg kicks due to his really long legs. He's a big dude. He's a very physically strong guy. He closes the distance and battles chest to chest. I've compared him in the past to like Kamaru Usman. That's his position. Like people think about like obviously the takedowns and that's there, but he can just use his size, grind inside. He beat up Scott Holtzman with knees inside. For a BJJ guy, he's a really good wrestler. I mean, he showed phenomenal takedown defense against Mateusz Gamrot, and his grappling is elite. I mean, you're talking about multi-time no-gi world champion, incredible top game, as you mentioned, great back takes. His scrambles against Gamrot, and I keep mentioning that because in recent history, that's his best performance. I mean, they were awesome. He doesn't rush submissions. He's got 8 submissions. So this is a fight. If I was the UFC matchmakers, I wouldn't have made this one. I really don't think it makes a lot of sense in the sense. But Moicano's this, and I know they're both close to each other in age, but Moicano's this rising star who, you know, do you really want him to be tested against a 35-year-old who, if he wins, I mean, will casuals really view that as a great win? And then if he loses, did you really want to push over Dariush? The question is what does Dariush have left? Now, obviously, the betting lines is saying nothing. If both these guys were in their prime, I would feel very confident in picking Dariush.
Sure.
It's just wondering, and I definitely believe Dariush isn't in his prime anymore. I think that's pretty clear, but it's you know, how far away from his decline? Is this like right off the cliff kind of decline for him, or is this a slow, gradual decline? I mean, he didn't look good, but his 2 losses came against Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan. And the Oliveira one wasn't, he was doing okay, or, you know, early in that fight. Moicano was more technical on the feet, and he's definitely the more defensive sound fighter. But Dariush is the one who, I know you picked Moicano to knock out, but if it's a one-punch knockout, holy shit moment, it's probably more likely Dariush. Both guys, huh?
Oh yeah, for sure. I totally agree.
I mean, I guess you could argue, well, Dariush's chin, maybe that isn't true, but
I mean, for what it's worth, I'm picturing an accumulation of damage and probably Dariush getting dropped on the feet and pounded out on the ground.
Yeah, agreed. If you take Moicano by knockout, that's how I agree. Like he busted his nose up and busted his eye up and slowly. Yeah, it's not like you know, Shane Carwin, one big land punch and the guy face plants. If you got a face plant moment, it's Dariush. Mm-hmm. Both guys are phenomenal grapplers. I mean, Dariush is bigger, and I actually do think he's the better wrestler. Mm-hmm. If he can close the distance and look to wrestle, and as you mentioned, is his best avenue of victory, if he can pin him against the cage for long periods of time, win the grappling battle, he could win. That's how, if they fought each other 3 years ago, I would have picked it. Does Dariush have anything left in the tank? I'm going to go against the betting lines. I'm going to say he does. I'm going to say Dariush uses his size, pins Moicano against the cage, gets some takedowns, wins the grappling from on top. Give me Dariush by – I'm going to say it's close. I agree with you that Moicano, I think, is going to have the better exchange on the feet. I think it's going to be really close. I like it being only 3 rounds for Dariush instead of 5. Give me Dariush by split decision.
Third from the top at UFC 311 is a light heavyweight matchup between 2 former champs in Yuri Prochazka and Jamal Hill. Prochazka, the 32-year-old Czech, is 35-1 overall. He is 4-2 since joining the UFC as the former Ryzen light heavyweight champ. He is coming into this fight off a loss. He faced Alex Pereira at UFC 303 last June, got head kicked early in the second round. That was his second loss to Pereira. So an uphill climb back into a title shot for as long as Poatan remains atop the division. But a good step in that direction would be a win over Hill. Hill, 33-year-old Michigan native, 12-2 with 1 no contest overall. 6-2 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He is coming in off a loss as well. It is also to Alex Pereira. They headlined UFC 300 last April, where Pereira fought off a groin strike, fought off the interposing hand of, I believe, Herb Dean, and then knocked out Hill with the other hand. Hill has been complaining about it ever since, but nonetheless, it goes down as a knockout loss. These 2 gentlemen combined are 0-3 against the champ, which makes this one of those strange fights in that it is one of those fights that features 2 top 5 fighters and yet has next to no immediate title implications. Keith, the 3 remaining fights on this card, Prochazka versus Hill, Dvalishvili versus Nurmagomedov, and Makhachev versus Sarukian. One of them is a pick'em. Which is it?
Man, I'm really it's really close. I mean, all 3 of them I think should be really close betting lines. I'm gonna say this one. I'm gonna say this one's dead pick'em.
You are correct. This one is a dead pick'em. Both men out there around -110, -115, depending on your sports book of choice.
Can I say that I think, like, obviously this, we talked about the star, how great of a pay-per-view this is.
Yeah.
That said, I feel like the UFC kind of missed an opportunity to give a huge, like, city, not a pay-per-view, but fight night, but the one that's in an arena somewhere, say, freaking Atlantic City or something, these 2 guys headlining, because you got Prochazka that has like this cult following, and then you got Hill, who has just made himself one of the biggest villains in MMA by fight, picking a fight with like the baby face of MMA right now, and Alex Pereira. I think the crowd would have loved this fight, and obviously I understand. The LA crowd is going to, or hopefully the LA crowd gets this huge fight. But I mean, I just feel like this should have been a main event.
I agree. And worth noting that if this were a fight night headliner somewhere, it would be a 5-round fight, which is what these guys are used to, even if they don't always need it. And that would throw a different dynamic on here as well. These are 2 gigantic, generally extremely exciting fighters who also happen to be recent former champs and still top 5 talents. Who gets it done? Who makes a case for another crack at the champ?
Yeah. Man, this is. I'm glad that the line is dead, even because this is such a freaking fun matchup. I've flip-flopped. I mean, usually when you have a line that's a pick 'em, you should flip-flop. You should kind of. I mean, both guys are really good. I'll say this: I end up picking one guy, and I don't want to head. I was picking the other guy. Like I wrote him down before tape study. Tape study did not change who I picked. It was more of a gut thing. But I changed the guy I was going to take the whole time. I went against it. Let me ask you this: if you're the UFC, I mean, obviously Prochazka has such a cult following, but you probably want Hill to win, because you're really stuck with Prochazka, because you can't do a 3rd fight against Pereira. I know Pereira might be moving up to heavyweight and everything. That changed everything. But, if he stays at light heavyweight and defends the title, you can't really do a 3rd fight after he's smashed Prochazka twice now. But the 2nd fight with Hill is still there because of how Hill has, like, I don't believe any of his stuff with it messed up the timing, and there was he took a step when there was all that nonsense. But he's put it in some people's head, and he's made a narrative on it. And Alex Pereira is like, he's so real, but everything he does seems like you would write that in Hollywood.
Yeah.
When Hill went up to him and was like trying to punk him off in the gym, and he just like doesn't say anything, just reaches down and grabs boxing gloves and throws it at him. It was like the coldest, like, it to me. And then obviously he'll back down, and like, very like, you shouldn't be boxing Alex Pereira for free, but like, and Alex knows when he threw him the boxing glove that wasn't going to happen. But it was to me, it was as bad of a diss as like Connor to Jeremy Stevens,
who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, who the fuck is that guy moment. Like, it was, everybody was just like, holy shit, that was a worse knockout than the fight at UFC 300. I mean, that was so dope.
And they're both smart guys, because I do believe that Hill thinks he would beat Pereira in a rematch. I don't think he's like lobbying to get his ass kicked.
No,
but he knows that if he wants to make sure that he gets a rematch before somebody else grabs a spot, he needs to do 2 things. You already mentioned one of them: plant the narrative in enough fans' heads that, hey, a second fight might go differently. And number 2, make Pereira mad.
Yeah. And number 3, you have to be the villain, because Pereira is so internationally, like based on all the things he's did like last year and headlining this card and saving that card and just everybody loves him. I mean, everybody loves him. I mean, other than his bonus. I mean,
yeah.
All right, so no, let's talk about it. Somehow we got big, huge talking to Alex Pereira because I mean, I guess he deserves even to get talked about on this card.
Well, he's looming over this fight like a shadow. So
yeah, of course,
yeah.
Of course. As far as who I think is going to win this fight, I'll start with. I mean, they both. You know, the funny thing about this that's kind of hidden in this narrative is both guys became champion and had to vacate their title, and Prochazka and Hill, if you remember. At the same Prochazka gave up the title. Hill ends up winning the vacant title. There was a narrative for these two guys to be headlining a pay-per-view, fighting for the real title. And then obviously Alex Pereira ruins all of that. But like no one's talking about that. Like just a little while ago, this was viewed as your 205 title fight. So Prochazka, I mean, he's such a great athlete. He flows so well. He can fight out of both stances. He's so unorthodox though. He's got this like herky jerky, weird movement. I've compared it to like the old school Keith Jardine, where his awkwardness just kind of gets his opponent like guessing and backing up, and he fights so fearless. I mean, he's nonstop marching towards his opponent, using all his movement to distract his opponent, and then suddenly he just springs into the pocket and he unloads big combination. He's one of the hardest hitters in the history of the sport. I mean, the guy has, I think it's 26 knockouts, which is nuts. I mean, having 26 wins is big. Never mind 26 knockouts. He really sits on his punches, generates power. He will just bite down on his mouthpiece and swing hard, and just kind of like, hey, let's see what happens. I mean, you go back to like the knockout of Volkan Oezdemir, the walk off of that. His KO of Alexander Rakic was one of the most beautiful things you've seen. Obviously, the
Reyes knockout
is just like, I was going to mention because that was just pure like nuts. Like it's like I don't think he could duplicate that one. That was ridiculous. He works the body really well. He throws great kicks. I mean, he destroyed Rakic's legs with kicks. Though he is open to leg kicks himself. I mean, Alex Pereira murdered him in both their fights, especially the first fight with leg kicks. He isn't a great wrestler, but he can sneak in some takedowns. He's more intelligent of a fighter than people think. He's more of a thinker than people think, even though he does all these wild stuff. I mean, he got takedowns against Dominic Reyes, against Rakic, against even Pereira. He took him down in their first fight. His takedown defense is really bad. I mean, Glover Teixeira took him down with ease, but he does have a very good get-up game. He's hard to hold down. And to his credit, he caught Teixeira in a submission, which is, one of the most amazing feats in the history of MMA. And I do think there's some fluky to this, but he has 3 subs on his record. I am worried about his chin, though. I mean, he was just knocked out bad. He's been knocked out multiple times recently, so that's concerning. Hill, he's a southpaw. He's a long and lengthy striker. He's a good striker, very accurate. He has huge power. He loves his straight left. He works the body well too. Knees and kicks are a big part of his game. He loves to step in knees. He likes his teep kicks. He's got a mean body kick. He's got a sneaky high kick. He does need to improve his defense. Again, I know I'm a broken record on this card. It seems like all the fighters have the same flaws on this one. He keeps his chin high in the air. He doesn't move his head, very like Muay Thai kickboxing style, where he stands right in front of his opponent. He kind of has that classic tall man's defense. He will close the distance and wrestle a lot. He likes to get in the clinch. He likes to toss in knees really well in there. I wouldn't say he's a wrestler, but he can sneak in a takedown, and he's a solid grappler. He is inconsistent with his defensive wrestling. I mean, he was easily taken down by Thiago Alves, but then he showed great takedown defense against Glover Teixeira, who is a historically really good wrestler. Because of his length, he will toss up submission attacks, though he doesn't have a submission on his record. I think this is an incredible matchup. It's one of the fights I'm really, I mean, I don't want to say I'm most excited for it because of the 2 fights right above it is like, oh my gosh, bonkers, both of them. But what I love about this is you're going to be edge you see, because either guy can land a big shot. I mean, and that's always Prohaska's fight. Like anybody can land a big shot anytime. Prohaska has been tagged in so many fights, which really gives Hill such an opportunity. I could see Hill also clinching and working inside and beating him up and kind of take a safer route, sneaking some takedowns. I've flip-flopped on this fight. I expect Hill, though, to work from range, to piece up Prohaska. Prohaska is so hittable. The problem is you got to be perfect. You do that, Prohaska. I'm going to say Hill's teeing up, having his way, and then he makes one mistake, and Prohaska turns his lights out with one shot. Give me Prohaska by first round TKO.
I love the pick there, and I love the breakdown. And you kind of pointed out the thing that gives me the most pause, and that is that Prohaska is so defensively. I don't even want to say he's defensively porous, because I think he knows how to defend himself. He's defensively reckless. And you mentioned some of the incredible finishes he's gotten in the UFC. And in pretty much every case, those finishes make it easy to forget how we got there. I mean, he destroyed Dominic Reyes with what was my favorite knockout of 2021. But 60 to 90 seconds before that, Reyes clocked him. And Prohaska was stumbling all over the place. And if Reyes had just punched him a couple more times in the head instead of grabbing a guillotine and falling to guard like a doofus, Prohaska maybe doesn't make it to a title shot at all, because he fought Teixeira in his very next fight. Like even against overmatched opponents over in Ryzen, when he was fighting like rematching Mola Wall and fighting Fabio Maldonado, like dudes that were like half his size, both those guys put leather on him. It's part of what makes him so endlessly exciting and enjoyable to watch. Just the wildness, the recklessness of it, but it makes it tough to pick him with any confidence, which is, you know, kind of like you mentioned here. Maybe Hill's kind of putting it on him. Hill leaves himself open for one technique. We don't know what it is. Maybe Prohaska's been watching early Michel Pereira fights and he decides he wants to try like a capoeira helicopter kick. I don't know. I can see that happening. I can also see Prohaska going through his usual process, getting hit cleanly a couple times, and all of a sudden his chin and his recoverability just aren't quite enough to get him back over the hump. So I'm going to go the other way here, and I'm going to say that Hill gets the first round knockout. All I would say is, if you're a betting person, I mean, it's a pick 'em fight, and we've now picked both fighters opposite ways by first round knockout. Whatever you pick, take the prop for inside the distance. Prohaska hasn't heard a final horn since like 2016. This should be one hell of a fight for however long it lasts. I can't wait for it. Give me Hill by first round knockout, but Prohaska by first round knockout would be my second most likely outcome. That brings us to the co-main event of UFC 311, a men's bantamweight title fight between your champ, Merab Dvalishvili, and the challenger, undefeated Umar Nurmagomedov. Dvalishvili, the 34-year-old Georgian by way of Long Island, is 18-4 overall. He's 11-2 in the UFC. He lost his first two fights in the octagon in two different mildly controversial ways. Since then, he's won 11 straight, leading up to his title win at UFC 306 last September, where he took a fairly one-sided unanimous decision over Sean O'Malley, much to the chagrin of everybody involved in promoting the UFC. This will be his first title defense, and it's a big one, as it is the most undefeated scion of the Nurmagomedov family, Umar. 29-year-old Dagestani, 18-0 as a professional, 6-0 in the UFC. He fought twice last year, picking up unanimous decisions over Beksat Almakhan in March and Corey Sandhagen in August in the headliner of UFC on ABC 7. that last win, the pretty impressive washing of longtime contender in Sandhagen, paved the way for this title shot. Keith, who's the favorite and what is the line?
All right, so I know you said one of the lines gonna be off, but the line's gonna be. I mean, this one. There's no way this line isn't insanely close. I'll say Nurmagomedov is actually the favorite, just because of the last name.
Okay, you are correct.
Because he's really good. But
you are correct. Nurmagomedov is the favorite. What's the line?
I'm gonna be way off, but I would set it like negative 125.
Umar Nurmagomedov minus 360.
That's fucking nuts.
Merab Dvalishvili plus 260.
That's crazy. That's crazy. What are we doing? All right. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm doing it for the reactions. But having said that, I was floored as well. I
wasn't saying you. I meant just in general. Like,
yeah,
it's got to be if his last name was not Nurmagomedov and his last name was Jones, Merab is probably the favorite.
That's entirely possible. And even if his name is Nurmagomedov, if he has two meaningless losses at the beginning of his career that have no bearing on what kind of fighter he is now, the line is much closer. It's the perfect storm of things. Yes.
He won like the moments in the press conference helps him. Like little things have all gone his way to make him more of a betting favorite.
Yeah. Here's the thing, and I believe I've said this about both Merab Dvalishvili and Bilal Muhammad, that I'm really coming more and more to think of as, two kind of different size analogs for each other. As great as Merab has been over this 11 fight win streak in the UFC, that he should be 13-0 in the UFC. I'm sure we'll get to that, but
yes,
as impressive as he was early on, in kind of a numbing way. Yeah, it's not always the easiest to watch, but just as predictable as a sunrise. We only found out within the last 2 years that it was going to be even worse once this guy got 5-round fights. This is a man who everything about his game was built for 5-round fights.
Yeah. Yes. Built for 20-round fights. Yeah. Yeah.
Like you want like the old school Gracie thing, or like what the Diaz brothers always wanted, like no time limit. We're just going to fight for 90 minutes. I think Merab could take some UFC heavyweights in a 90-minute fight. like
Derek
Alexander Romanov would have like a heart attack at minute 43. Yeah. Merab was like running around him like a Looney Tunes character. It would look like some shit from like, K1 back in like 2002 or
it would look like a friggin' like honey badger fighting like an ox.
Yes.
Just going around him and like biting him and
yes. Nurmagomedov is younger. He's bigger. He's more athletic. He's an outstanding wrestler. Merab is an outstanding wrestler as well, but Merab is a rinse and repeat wrestler. It's not an airtight thing where as soon as he gets on your hips, you're down and the round is over. He gets a lot of mat returns. There are fights where he's 16 for 22 on takedown attempts. If you had to take someone down 16 times in 3 rounds or 5 rounds, it means they got back up a lot. That's Merab. Like his striking is furiously paced. His wrestling is furiously paced. And it's almost like both of them are calculated to frustrate and wear out his opponent as much as anything else. This is a fight where, just spoiler, I'm leaning Merab to defend here. And I'm going to feel pretty comfortable with that, even if Nurmagomedov wins the first round and he's winning halfway through the second round.
Yeah, I agree.
We've seen that Umar Nurmagomedov can go 5 rounds, but what we've seen is he can go 5 rounds when he is putting it on somebody. Like he beat Sandhagen convincingly, and he seemed fresh as a daisy at the end of the fight. And I've said this before. It's easy to have enough cardio when you're dictating the pace of the fight, where nobody is making you move when and where you don't want to go. That's what makes you tired is, oh, I got to do something now or this guy's going to take me down. I got to do something now or this guy's going to hit me with an 8-punch combo and I'm going to be hurt. Like when you're dictating the pace and you can take a breather and go when you want to go. Yeah. All your cliches, like this is going to be a deep waters fight. Obviously Nurmagomedov can win. He's heavily favored for a reason. He has a better chance of beating Merab than I think anybody else who's in the division right now. Like there are some prospects coming up, but if Nurmagomedov doesn't beat Merab, we might be in for an era here.
Yeah.
But Nurmagomedov's going to be tested in a way that he has not been. I think Nurmagomedov is going to have some good success in the striking. Like he's long, he has good reach, he uses his reach well, and Merab is short, has short arms, and when he's not paying attention, makes things worse by like not throwing not throwing as straight of shots as he can. He's like this kind of like furious little ball of hooks. I could see Nurmagomedov kind of staying out of Merab's way, tagging him up in the striking. Especially early on, but Merab just gets better and better as the fight goes. So it's not enough for Umar Nurmagomedov to win the first round or win the first 2 rounds unless he does some damage. Again, if he's up 20-18 at the end of the first 2 rounds, I'm still picking Merab. Like I'm not going to pick against Merab Dvalishvili in a 5-round fight until I see reason to do otherwise. Give me Merab to do a Merab special here. I do think he's going to have a ton of trouble early on. I think he's going to have a lot of trouble taking Nurmagomedov down if he tries in the early rounds. Just Nurmagomedov is too big, too fast, too good a wrestler. I think he's going to have some frustration in the striking. Again, Nurmagomedov is rangy, can fight a good outfight. He's good. He's good at using kicks without like exposing himself to being taken down as well. So give me Nurmagomedov to really look good in the early going, but Merab just to kind of turn a switch around the midpoint of the fight. Give me Merab to win the last 3 rounds of this fight and maintain the title in what I guess will be a pretty major upset.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're not a betting show. Check out the guys who bet who can understand the lines, but I that's nuts, man. That's it's almost not even that nuts, it's disrespectful. I mean, Merab's freaking good, man. One thing that really stood out to me is you mentioned the kicks of Nurmagomedov. I'm really wondering about that. Like, how much will he kick? Because that's such a big part of his game. This is the first guy that could actually take him down, you know. I'll start with Merab. I mean, I've said before, he should be on the UFC. I've gone on and on about that. I keep saying until he loses clean in the UFC. I think your breakdown of him was perfect. I mean, his entire game is centered around pace. He probably has the best cardio in the UFC. You talk about, you know, it's can you fight off all the attacks from him? It's like it's someone who like swims in the pool or treads water pool. Like, yeah, that's hard. Like treading water is very tiring. Mm-hmm. But now have a tornado drop in that pool as you're treading water and see how hard it is. Like that's Merab. He's on the gas the entire bout, constantly moving forward, pushing his opponent onto their back foot. On the feet, and I mean this as a compliment, on the feet, he fights like an elementary school kid. And what I mean by that, he's just winding up and he's trying to knock you out with every single punch. He doesn't care about being countered. He never think like I think about like when I box with my son and fool around. He just like this when he's like playing like we're doing distance. I just slap box him a little bit and like tap him and stuff. And then when he just like goes berserk and he's just throwing wildly. I mean, he's never thinking about being countered. And I'm just standing back like moving. Yeah, obviously I'm not gonna punch my kid. I'm not freaking Dumas over here that I'd knock out my 9-year-old kid, but that's how he fights. He's just like he doesn't care about being counted. He trusts his chin and he's willing to take the chance. And no, he should worry about it because he does carry his chin really high, and he's been hurt. I mean, he was hurt to the body by O'Malley in a one-sided affair. He throws punches just to kind of force his opponent back to bring that hands up. He'll do some spinning shit just to kind of get them to back away. Because if he does a big spinning back fist, you have to really jump back. To his credit, he has cleaned up his striking a little bit, and he's thrown a little bit more straight shots. He had some success with calf kicks against Petr Yan. I don't think you don't want to get in a clean kickboxing match with Umar Nurmagomedov. I think Berserker would be good for him, at least in times. Like, if he goes Berserker, Nurmagomedov could take him down. That will happen, but Nurmagomedov is going to have to make big movements, and all of Merab's striking is to eventually get the fight to the ground. I love that you talked about his entries. He doesn't have elite entries. He just will keep shooting nonstop. He's not, if we think about like entries as like a sniper, he's not a sniper like in the field measuring his target. Okay, I'm at 3 clicks. I'm at 4 clicks. He's the guy who just jumps on the top with the machine gun, and he's just shooting everything he can see, just spraying bullets like left and right. And that's how his entries are. He'll just keep shooting nonstop. And it's his mindset. He doesn't care if you block like his first freaking dozen entries. He eventually will take you down. I mean, he shot on Petr Yan 49 times, which is like that seems like one of these stats you hear in sports. You're like, no, there's no way that's a typo. Yeah. He would just shoot to get his opponent tired, and he trusts like you will get tired before he does. He chains attacks together well. He'll shoot a double and then like quickly hit a single. He'll circle one way on a single and then hit a misdirection the other way, which I love, which my son actually hit today in a wrestling match. I was super proud of him. He has that like Yanni style to it where he's going one way and kind of gets you guessing one way and then comes back across the other way. I like his foot sweeps that he's added to his game. I'd be really surprised if he foot sweeps to Nurmagomedov, but he could. And you talk about his control. He needs to improve his control. Everyone gets back up with him, but he doesn't care. And in a sense, like it might actually be a good thing for him. And I'm going to talk back what I said. I said he needs to improve his control. And I'm thinking on the fly, no, it's probably good for him because the guy has to use all this energy to get right back up. And then he just drops him right back down again. And he's like, you don't use energy if you're laying on the ground with me on top of you. I mean, you do some, but not to the same extent if you get up and then just drop you right back down. Nurmagomedov, I mean, the guy's such an elite level athlete. He's super elusive. He can fight out of both stances, constantly switching back and forth. He evades attacks really well with footwork. He has that Taekwondo style of striking where he's very bladed and hard to hit. He's got solid boxing. I'd say underrated power. He's got a really good kicking game, hard kicks to the body. Again, I'm wondering if he's going to use that. He's a good wrestler, definitely more technical in the wrestling than Merab is. His entries are fast as anybody in the UFC. He sets up his entries well with his strikes. He'll throw like a jab and follow that right into one of his entries. He hit Nate Maness with one of the sweetest body lock inside trips you'll see. Smothering top control. Cuts through his opponent's guard really well. He's got good ground and pound. He's a submission artist. He's got 7 subs on his record. This fight's amazing. And I was watching an interview with Nurmagomedov with Brett Anamoto, and he wasn't cocky in the sense when he's very confident. Obviously, he thinks he's going to win, but like the way he broke down Merab's game, like he knows he's going to get taken down. Like he's admitted, like I'm going to be taken down. It's going to happen. Like this way this guy fights, which got me. It's weird. It was such a small line that I think most people would have glazed over it. And it got me so excited for the fight because he knows this is going to be a nuts. He's not predicting that. He knows it's going to be a deep waters matchup.
I real quick, I remember that, and it reminds me of Alex Volkanovski ahead of the first Makhachev fight, where he's like, yeah I know he's going to take me down, but he better be ready for me to get back up.
Yeah, I know.
And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Yeah. And it was so good. Yeah.
I love everything about Alex Volkanovski. His prime was some peak MMA of all time, some of the peak watching. I mean, this fight is amazing. My only knock on this card it really, I shouldn't say only knock, but like one of my big knocks on this card is that this fight isn't headlining a pay-per-view, isn't headlining the pay-per-view itself. And I mean, it's that good. It deserves the top bill. I'm not saying over Makhachev and Tsarukyan. That's it. I'm saying a different pay-per-view, like a month from now, 2 months from now. I mean, because that's how good this is. Like, this shouldn't be playing second fiddle to any fight.
Well, the UFC will probably run, 11, or 12 pay-per-views this year, and Merab versus Umar Nurmagomedov will probably be like at worst the fourth or fifth best main event, or like the
Absolutely.
fourth or best fight all year. There will be numerous UFC pay-per-view headliners that are not as good as this fight coming up.
Absolutely. You're 100%.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised this is a top 3 fight of the year. It's like I'm that jazzed up for this fight. Merab's pace is so insanely good, but Nurmagomedov is so technical. I think we get some all-time great scrambles. I think you have a very good read on this fight. I think Nurmagomedov wins scrambles early. I think Merab's pace and cardio helps him win late rounds. So to me, it comes down to how long until Merab's cardio takes over. And you're saying like third round it takes over, so he gets the win. I'm right there on the fence. I'm really torn. That's why I'm like, I can't believe this line is that big. I'm going to say it takes over after round 3, round 4, round 5. I think Nurmagomedov really slows down. Merab starts going. The thing that hurts Merab with this pace is he's not a finishing machine.
No.
If he was somehow could fight at this pace, but had like Charles Oliveira submission skills, or the John Jones get on top, drop an elbow style, then I would take him.
Because it's hard for him even to get 10-8 rounds. Like he can wash somebody and it's still a 10-9 round.
Yes. So I don't, even if Nurmagomedov is completely gassed, I don't see Merab getting a finish.
Right.
So I say Nurmagomedov holds on, survives a late Merab surge. Give me Nurmagomedov in a very close decision.
All right.
Dude, I'm so like spent right now. Like I'm like spent. Like now you want me to get up again and like just leave this in. Get up again for the main event. That's even just as good. It's just as good. Like this is nuts.
It really is. Like what a card, man.
This is a great card.
All right. With that, we come to the main event of UFC 311, a lightweight title fight between your defending champ Islam Makhachev and challenger Arman Tsarukyan. Makhachev, the 33-year-old Dagestani, is 26-1 overall. He is 15-1 in the UFC, and he's on a 14-fight win streak, including his title run. He is now the 3-time defending champ. He took the title from Charles Oliveira in October of 2022 at UFC 280. Since then, he has 2 wins over featherweight champ Alex Volkanovski, the first one hard, the second one kind of easy. And in his most recent appearance last June at UFC 302, he got a 5th-round submission of Dustin Poirier in a fight in which he was heavily favored, but Poirier put on maybe a more spirited performance than some people expected. But nonetheless, Makhachev is your defending champ. He is rapidly scaling the list of the greatest lightweights of all time, perhaps even threatening to pass his mentor and longtime training partner, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Beating Tsarukyan would go a long way towards that. Let's meet him. 28-year-old, Russian of Armenian descent, is 22-3 overall. He's 9-2 in the UFC. He's on a 4-fight win streak. Those dating back a little over 2 years. It's over Demirez Magulov, Joaquim Silva, Beneil Dariush, and Charles Oliveira. The most recent of those, the Oliveira fight, was at UFC 300 last April. These two, of course, fought already once. It was back in April of 2019. It was Tsarukyan's UFC debut, and it was when Makhachev was still very much a rising prospect. But Makhachev won that one by unanimous decision in a very fun wrestling-heavy fight. Odds here should come as no surprise that the defending champ is the favorite. Keith, what is the line?
Well, I mean, I didn't keep track, but I think we figured out that there's, the top 3 fights, 2 of them will be close. So, and that's how it should be. So
No. Of the top 3 fights, one of them was a pick'em. That was Prochazka versus Hill. I didn't really say anything about the other 2.
Oh, don't tell me this line is way off. No, there's no way. There's no way. Makashev's a favorite, as you said. And Refis, I mean, he won the first fight. He's the champion. He's beat bigger names. But I mean, negative 130.
Islam Makhachev minus 400. Arman Tsarukyan plus 300. For reference, the first time they fought, when nobody knew who the hell Arman Tsarukyan was, Makhachev closed at like minus 350.
Did they not watch that first fight? I just watched it again today just to like refresh my memory.
Just to enjoy the greatness. It was so good.
Dude, it's so fucking close.
Yep.
It was extremely close.
Yep. Individual rounds were close. The overall fight was close. Yeah. It's the mythical, well, not even mythical, the real but often forgotten, like Khabib versus Gleison Tebow fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like no, I mean Tsarukyan is 9-2 in the UFC. His 2 losses were to great wrestlers who also happen to be a lot bigger than him, like Islam Makhachev and Mateusz Gamrot. Both of them were 2 of the more enjoyable grappling heavy fights of their respective years, and both of them were super close.
Yeah, I think Gamrot wasn't a split decision.
It was unanimous.
Okay, I thought it was just, but it was very close.
Yeah, it was very close. Like, tell me how you think this one plays out, man. Who wins? What's it look like?
I don't know which line is crazier. You know what? I'm gonna say this line's even crazier, and I'll tell you why. We've seen them fight in a super close fight. Like the other one we haven't seen, so I could see. Okay, I can't see it, but I'm thinking like maybe people really looking at the skill set and say Nurmagomedov is so much better. But this one we've seen. Now again, I know Makhachev has grown and become better, and I mean the guy's the man. So I'm not knocking Makhachev. I mean, I think despite what Dana says, this guy's the best pound for pound fighter in the world. To me, there really isn't a strong argument against him. I mean, the guy's an incredible athlete. He's one thing I'll say since their first fight, and maybe this is the argument, he has improved on the feet so much better since then. He flows really well. He's a southpaw with fast hands. He's a very technical striker. He's accurate. One thing I've said about him a lot is he's constantly winning the leg battle to set up his power shots. He's got tight pocket boxing. He sets up his shots well with feints. I mean, he blasted Charles Oliveira with a beautiful right hook. His fade back left hand is very good. He had success against Volkanovski with that. He's got an incredible kicking game, hard kicks to body. I mean, hit that high kick against Volkanovski in the second fight was unbelievable. He's one of the all-time greats, besides his striking, and everyone thinks about his wrestling, and obviously that's it. But he's one of the all-time greats at closing the distance and just working against the cage. His cage control is second to none. A perfect example is how he just neutralized Volkanovski for long periods of time in the first fight. His dirty boxing inside, I think he's so good because his opponents are worried about takedowns and trips, and then suddenly he's on a collar tie and he's throwing punches, and he gets a couple off before they really kind of get to react to that. Now he's don't get me wrong, like I'm saying it's just something that like cage work gets overlooked a lot, but it's such a big part of his game. But he's also like a fantastic outside wrestler. Like he can shoot. Though, and I know this is like friends talking junk and a little bit of like comedy, but like him saying he can out wrestle Jordan Burroughs is one of the dumbest things ever spoken by man. Like that was in a straight wrestling match. But he gets in. He's got good upper body takedowns. He also has fast entries. He is similar to Khabib, where he doesn't explode through the hip. He's more about getting to the hip and then kind of turning the corner, turning a single into a double, and then working an angle. He also, but on the flip side, the difference between his wrestling and Khabib is he doesn't get as many center of the cage takedowns like Khabib did. He's still very good at it, but I mean, he likes to more like shoot, get the person against the cage where they can't really sprawl, then chain, turn a corner on like an ankle, or run the pipe or something like that, or lift a high crotch in the air. So he really likes getting his takedowns more where his opponents are pressed against the cage. But he also just will create a scramble and is really good at winning the scramble. He's one of these guys. He isn't about just driving through your hips. He's good at like just winning the inching game, like hit a slide by or something like that. He uses his long legs when he gets the fight to the ground to grab a limb, to control. His takedown defense is rock solid. I mean, look at the first fight against Armin Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan ended up taking him down one time, but Tsarukyan kept shooting to take him down, and he'd get deep on the leg and wouldn't be able to get Makhachev down. He's got good control on top. And we saw that in some portions of the fight against Tsarukyan. He also is similar to Merab in the sense it isn't just about taking your opponent down, but it's making them use so much energy to get back up to their feet and wear and he'll hang on his opponents for long periods of time, kind of like not only you have to get up, you got to carry my 175, 180 pounds in that fight as he's trying to get up. And that kind of crushes their spirit. And then what crushes me worse, you work all the way to get back up and then he just trips your way back down. Even if it's not even just all the way down, but just going from like to your feet down to a knee or something like that is so mentally draining on a guy. If he gets him straight out, he'll pin them to the canvas and just squeeze the life out of them. He's got mean ground and pound. I mean, we saw him batter Bobby Green with ground and pound. Now, it isn't Habib's ground and pound, which he'll get compared to, but he's a super slick, more, I don't want to say more of a submission artist than Habib, but like he looks for submissions a lot. He's got some good back takes. He is a big submission threat. He subbed Dan Hooker. He made BJJ black belt like Thiago Moises, who obviously is really, we saw him this past weekend, made him look like a white belt. And then he subbed the greatest submission artist or submission threat in the history of the UFC, and Charles Oliveira with these. So Tsarukyan, he's also an incredible athlete. I mean, he looked absolutely incredible against Bernardo Dariush. I mean, he ran right through him. He's very well-rounded. He moves so well, cuts angles, constantly moving, darting, a little Volkanovski in that sense. Good head movement. He's a slip and rip guy. So good at slipping shots, but still staying in range to counter with his own accurate shots. And he's a good boxer, quick hands, works the body well. I mean, like we talk about the Gamrot fight, like his big success in that fight was where he was working the body of Gamrot. He has big power in both hands. He can knock you out with either shot. It's also some fun spinning attacks. He loves calf kicks. He's an excellent wrestler. I mean, he lost the wrestling match to Makhachev in their matchup, but he had a lot of moments. And if I know this wasn't a straight wrestling match, but if it was a wrestling match, this is like a wrestling match going to overtime or a guy getting a takedown at the end to secure it. Like this wasn't a shellacking. I mean, it was very close. He's got fast entries. He's really good at winning scrambles. I love his foot sweeps inside the clinch. He'll get in there. I think it'd be pretty insane to foot sweep Makhachev. And actually, Makhachev, one of the takedowns he got on Tsarukyan was a foot sweep of Tsarukyan. He's a great grappler. I mean, he out-grappled Davi Ramos, who's a Abu Dhabi champion. He could people remember the late surge by Charles Oliveira, but he also controlled Charles Oliveira for really, really long periods of time in that fight. Had great top control. He attacks his opponent's posts, very similar to Makhachev, where trying to get out on the bottom. He's going to grab your post. He's going to secure your knees, secure your legs. Good head positioning on top. Nice slices and elbows. Showed really good sub-defense against Charles Oliveira and the mentality. Like a lot of people would have panicked against Charles Oliveira because, obviously his record of submitting guys. I am a little worried about his cardio. He lost to Gamrot because it was a incredibly high pace fight. And, he had like a 10 cardio and cardio might have slipped to a 9. And that might have been the difference in the fight in a really close fight. So, and then he also got in trouble. I mean, he did not panic against Oliver, but he did get in trouble late in the third round, which is concerning. I mean, this fight is amazing. It might be. I'm thinking about fights that are currently booked in the UFC, and this has got to be the best fight booked. The line is so off. This is so freaking good. Both guys are so amazing. Both guys are such amazing athletes. I'm so juiced right now talking about this fight. Both guys are so well-rounded. Makhachev has so much variety in his striking that I don't think he gets enough credit for that. But Tsarukyan has the ability to end the fight with one single blow. I mean, so does Makhachev, but man, both guys are such good wrestlers. Tsarukyan is blazing fast and wiry. Makhachev is just kind of like the king of grinding. I'm going to go with Makhachev to defend the belt and win again because he's so big. I expect him to close the distance, to use his size in the clinch. I expect him to kind of wear on Tsarukyan as the rounds go longer and longer. Goes in the deeper waters. I think the scrims are going to be super fun early. I think Makhachev will have the slight edge, especially if he can pin Tsarukyan against the cage. I think Tsarukyan will start to wear down, and Makhachev will kind of pull away a little bit late. Give me Makhachev by decision.
Yeah,
I talked a really long time. I'm sorry. These guys are just so technically fun.
Don't be sorry to me. Like that's what I'm here for. Is this gets me jazzed up for what I was already pretty jazzed up for. As again, I mean,
such a good.
If this ends up being the best fight of 2025, just in terms of who was in it, like going in, like on paper, this is as good a matchup as you can make, man.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a fight of the year candidate because I don't expect rock'em sock'em robot moments. I mean, I think we could have some, but it's going to be wrestling delight. The people who really enjoy that aspect of MMA, I think this is as good as you can get.
And you made a good point that Makhachev, since their first fight, I mean, again, it's been like 5.5 years. The really noticeable difference in him is that his striking has come along. Like, in 2019, he was very much Khabib's understudy, like same basic body type, same basic skill set. And at this point, and hell, even by the time Khabib retired, like 4 years ago, Makhachev had progressed to the point where he was a better and definitely more diverse striker than Khabib ever was. So those are huge strides that he's made. The thing to remember about Tsarukyan is when they fought the first time, he was 22 years old and it was his UFC debut.
Yeah.
He had never fought a top 100 lightweight before that. He's stepping in, fighting
weeks notice. Like was it like weeks? 3
fighting,
weeks?
Yeah. A huge super elite fighter, and gave him, aside from getting knocked out by Adriano Martins, the toughest fight he had up until the first Volkanovski fight. Like Volkanovski in the first fight and Tsarukyan are really the only two guys that have even really made Makhachev sweat. I like you made the point about Tsarukyan probably having better one-shot power, and that's something to be conscious of here, because I think back to the first Makhachev Volkanovski fight where, obviously it was an incredible fight, like so much better than I think it was so much better even than we expected. And we are huge boosters of Volkanovski, but we're like, Makhachev, it's too big. It's too much. Not only did, he show surprisingly resilient takedown defense and get up game, but dude, he knocked Makhachev down in the last round and was like parked on his chest, like punching him out as like time got ready to expire. Like there was like a finish wasn't coming, but it was a hell of an optic. They're in Australia.
Yeah. For a guy who's not known for his punching power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tsarukyan is known for his punching power.
Yeah. That's a good point.
If it comes to it and Ilia Topuria ends up fighting one of these guys next, Topuria has even more punching power than either guy.
I didn't even think about that. Oh my gosh.
But I'm so tempted to pick the upset here. But the thing is, I have the feeling this is going to be another razor close fight, whoever wins.
Sure.
I think Makhachev is going to get the better of the wrestling. Like, he is an incredible technical wrestler. He's so much bigger than Tsarukyan. We've seen them wrestle before, and while it was very even, Makhachev did get slightly the better of it. But I think Tsarukyan's probably going to hurt Makhachev on the feet more than once. Now, again, aside from just getting cold cocked by Adriano Martins, it's been really hard to hurt Makhachev on the feet. Like, people have hit him cleanly, and really Martins and Volkanovski are the ones that hurt him.
Could you imagine? Sorry to interrupt you. Could you imagine if that fight didn't happen? The hype on Makhachev right now. You take one meaningless fight a freaking decade ago, changes how people view somebody.
They'd be calling him the pound for pound GOAT right now. Or it would be between him and John Jones in most people's eyes, I think.
I think it would have surpassed Khabib. Like, I think people wouldn't be talking. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but sorry, continue.
No, it's and
we'll talk about that. Yeah. We'll talk about that Saturday night. Well, maybe we won't. Maybe we won't. But if he wins, he will be.
Man, I'm with you. I can't pull the trigger on Tsarukyan in the upset, even though we just finished watching a card where, you know, a rematch 5 or 6 years down the line went very, very differently when I didn't expect it to. And we just finished talking about, anyway, Tsarukyan has plenty of avenues to victory. I won't be shocked if he wins. Hell, I won't either. I won't be shocked if he knocks Makhachev out.
I wouldn't
whether
either.
It's in the first round or the fifth. But I do think that's the outside chance. I think what we're probably going to get is a razor close fight. But Makhachev, you know, he's going to win like 48, 47, 48, 47, 49, 46, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully it's the kind of fight that doesn't preclude Tsarukyan from getting back into the picture if he earns his way back, because he's 5 years younger than Makhachev. He's going to be around for a minute, you know, and he's a guy that he's small for 155. So it's not even like Makhachev, like how much longer is he going to be comfortable, you know, like making this cut. Like Tsarukyan's 28 years old and he might be a top 5 lightweight for like the next 6 or 8 years.
Yeah, like he could win the title 3 years from now.
Yeah. Give me Makhachev by decision. It'll be an entertaining fight, and if you're a wrestling and grappling fan, it'll be an absolute classic, just kind of like, you know, their first fight was. But yeah, give me and still as well here.
I got something for you. What if, imagine if we keep talking about maybe Tsarukyan catches Makhachev. What if Makhachev does to Tsarukyan and knocks him out early, high kicks him or something?
We'll definitely have a conversation on Saturday night. Like, be prepared to give me your all-time pound for pound top five. If
he does. Can Khabib and Islam's like stop having honor and just fight each other? Like, what the fuck, guys?
Well,
I don't think it's ever. I want to see.
You've seen Khabib recently. If they fight,
I know. Obviously, he'd have to get in shape and go back to something. But
we'd be more like right now. I would say Khabib is closer to Daniel Cormier in.
He's enjoying life.
Yeah, which good for him, dude. Like, if you're not enjoying your retirement, then
the people talking about him getting kicked off the airline and racism and this. It had nothing to do with that. It's just he was in the emergency exit. Nobody can get around him. They needed to get out.
Oh my goodness. That is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 311, Makhachev versus Tsarukyan 2. I have been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. Normally, there's a little more goofing off than we had tonight, but with 14 fights and a couple of really, really incredible ones, we kind of buckled down and stayed on task. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed it. Please do like, subscribe. Those don't cost you a thing. They make our bosses happy. Yeah, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We'd love to hear your take on these fights.
Help get our numbers
up. Each of us picked at least one pretty big upset here, because that's most of what we had on this card were big favorites. If you think we're out of our minds, let us know. If you think we missed any, let us know. But but most importantly, join us for the recap. We'll be live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We will talk about all 14 of these fights from the top down to the opener, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. The live chat is open that whole time, so we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we'd love for you to join. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
To the sea. Make your bed of fairy tales while you're hunting for your whale. So cold and blind. Don't